Excellencies, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the UNESCO-UNEVOC as we jointly celebrate this year's World Youth Skills Day together with the CEDEFOP. We are privileged to have you all here with us as we continue to extol the importance of World Youth Skills Day and the importance of the skills development for the youth worldwide through responsive, forward-looking and action-oriented policy and partnerships. With the Sustainable Development Agenda coming to the fore and the global consensus that surrounds it, TVET has been identified as a key action area to ensure the realization of education for all and mitigating the challenges of youth unemployment around the globe. Youth around the world continue to face increasing pressures when it comes to their absorption in the labor markets, and this is a fact that is largely owing to the disparities that exist between the skills they acquired at their educational and training grounds and those that are required by the industry. And as the policy consensus continues to grow around the potential of TVET to bridge this divide and disparity, there's an equal realization of the attractiveness of TVET being a constraint and how attractive it is as an educational pursuit by those affected by it the most. Today's event endeavors to address exactly this issue. What is it that determines the attractiveness of TVET and how it can be enhanced further? To discuss this and other associated themes, we have a distinguished and a diverse panel of stakeholders spanning across governments, researchers, academics, practitioners, industries, and most importantly, youth delegates. To formally start the proceedings of the day, I would request Mr. James Joachim Calleja from the CEDEFOP. He's the director of CEDEFOP to please welcome the audience.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It is really a pleasure to be here after 18 months of discussion with my colleague Shyamal about an initiative which will eventually create a dialogue, a more structured dialogue between the world of researchers, which is more or less what CEDEFOP stood for 42 years, because now we are 42 years old, and the world of practitioners. This is the whole initiative here, and Shyamal asked me to set the tone of this encounter here, and on a bright day such as this, I can only be very positive about the tone of this conference here. We really appreciate, first and foremost, the support we have received from UNEVOC, but also from other partners like BMBF here. Peter Thiel, our governor, has come to say hello to us, and which is for us a huge boost to our initiative, but also Nicolas, who could join us later on during the day. We reckon that this is an initiative which will create a dialogue, a more structured dialogue between researchers and practitioners. And the key initiative, the way I see it, at least from my point of view from CEDEFOP, is to be more strategic than remedial in vocational education and training. We really want to be in the forefront as an agency. We are at European level. We are opening our doors even more to breathe the air that other countries beyond the European Union breathe in terms of vocational education and training. We want to support with our research, with our outputs, which are increasing in quality, I would say, rather than in numbers, this dialogue between the vet researchers and practitioners. And we want to be strategic more than remedial, because we have a clear vision of where we want to take vets. We want vet to be a first option, to quote Commissioner Tyson. We want vet to be appealing to cross generations, and not just to young people, but older persons, the employed, the unemployed, the long-term unemployed. We want to stop re-engineering knowledge in vocational education training and give a fresh, practical roadmap, as you'll hear later on from my colleague Jens Bjornavold, the project on the changing nature and role of vet, which is giving a new lease of life to the meaning of vets and to the conceptual frameworks that drive the process of vets. We want to seriously remove the barriers and restore dignity in what is learning by doing. And this is part of the work that we are doing at CEDEFOP. And lastly, I see this as a lobby for more resources for VET to be more attractive. And I think this dialogue between researchers and practitioners should lead into that. I myself have played both roles. I have been a researcher myself, and of course as a researcher you feel proud when you publish books and when you publish papers and when you talk about your work. Of course you create new knowledge, you have a vision, you have new insights, you promote and you produce words, you communicate action, but at the end of the day you rely on practitioners whether all of these dreams will be put into practice. But the same happens to practitioners. Practitioners are there testing reality every day. They work with really unpredictable contexts. Young people who want to learn, others who don't want to learn. So they really work with reality there, and they feel entrenched in a situation where almost in a straitjacket. They want to produce, they want to be creative, but at the end of the day, they have people whom they are responsible for. We need, in a few words, a symbiotic relationship between researchers and practitioners. I use the word symbiosis, which is one of my favorite words, because it really brings together collaborative relationships. This is what we want to achieve. In 2015, we restructured our departments, and in the working groups at CEDEFOP, one word which came up, which for us is very important today, is the word brokerage or broker. We want to act as brokers in vocational education and training between what happens in research and what happens in the real world. Now we want to move a step further and say, let's merge these two worlds. Let's bring them even closer together to take action. And in being brokers, we have really made huge strides over these last few years. Just to mention a few platforms that we have, the Europass platform, the European Skills Panorama, or the Early Leavers Toolkit, or the Mobility Scoreboard. These are all platforms where we are outreaching more and more policymakers and practitioners in schools and in colleges. So why we are doing this? To my way of thinking, we still, in vocational education and training, suffer from poor reputation. This is not just at European level, and in some countries at European Union level, but also in other countries. In some countries or member states, they also suffer from quality, from resources, from governance. We have fierce competitors with universities, with mainstream education. We have inferior infrastructures which we have to address in vocational education and training. But we also know that the labour market is looking at people coming out from vocational education and training, because vocational education training is more dynamic in the way it produces knowledge and it transforms knowledge into employability. And in the variety of learning, we know we can capture more people who fail in the schooling system and therefore can acquire better skills. So to conclude, I think in bringing researchers and practitioners together, we go back to what we were saying in 2015 as an EU agency. We had a motto to celebrate our 40th anniversary, which was old roots, the roots of a tree, to new roots, new roadmaps. And I think this is the way forward for researchers and practitioners. We want to give a new lease of life to learning by doing, working and learning, and lifelong working and learning. These are our key principles on which we are designing our work program, our programming document, our research is moving in this direction. And again, this symbiosis that we want to create is a symbiosis which will eventually give vocational education and training and learners that experiential learning which they desperately need. At least most of them, they need experiential learning. So if you want to learn to swim, if you want to learn to drive a car, reading textbooks and watching YouTube videos on how to drive a car or how to swim will not help you actually drive a car or swim or dance. You need to put all of this into practice. Concluding, I think, first of all, I want to thank UNEVOC, a formidable partner here, but not only UNEVOC, BMBF, as I said, BIBB, and GIS, they have all supported our initiative. We want this dialogue to really move into the direction where action takes place after this meeting between researchers and practitioners. And Albert Einstein, in one of his famous quotes, said that in theory and practice are the same. In practice, they are not. And this is why we're here, to make this happen for vocational education training. And this partnership, I think, with UNEVOC will really bear fruit in the future and will produce action where the learners live and learn. So I really augur that today's meeting will be the first in a series of meetings between the two organizations and more. I hope this will multiply with other organizations. I really thank you for being here from different parts of the world, from what I learned. And I hope that we will see you also in CEDEFOP next year, our return game on this dialogue between researchers and practitioners. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to now welcome Dr. Shyamal Majumdar, who is the head of the UNESCO-UNEVOC International Center, to address the audience.
Thank you, James, for your really wonderful start. And you rightly has given the direction to this meeting today. First of all, I'd like to thank you specially, because you have to know that anything we like to do together, we need leader to support. I'm very pleased that when we start talking 2 years ago, that CEDEFOP is so much reach in research, doing so much work. UNEVOC is representing so much practitioner, but we never formally come to an agreement, work together. What is the problem, James? James said, yes, Shyamal, what is the problem? I said, why not? We start. We have our own structure, but you would be glad to know that we had a formal agreement with CEDEFOP and UNEVOC and UNESCO to have work this. We have convinced our management. So great, thank you very much, James, for the support that you have given during that whole trip. It is indeed a pleasure and honor for me to welcome you. In fact, today we are celebrating this World Youth Skill Day, and this program is webcast through all UNEVOC centers. I'd like to really congratulate all the UNEVOC centers, those who are watching this live stream. You have done a tremendous good job this year. Around 60 countries I have got in the report where the World Youth Skill Day has been observed by the UNEVOC centers. In this regard, I like to specially thank WorldSkills competition, with whom we are working together to take this agenda together. And finally, we will prepare a report, and that will be submitted to UN Secretary General, because you all know that yesterday in New York, we have conducted Secretary General's address, the World Youth Skill Day, which was initiated 3 years ago here. So it is a memorable day, it is a historical day, and we are really happy the support that has been given to us. But today's event for us is a little special dimension. There are 3 reasons behind it. This is the first time formally CEDEFOP and us together, along with all the stakeholders, particularly WorldSkills competition, Germany and others, we came together to discuss a very crucial thing. What is the speciality of this program? There are 3 specialties. First, it is basically a dialogue between European vet experts and practitioner rest of the world. So we have carefully chosen UNEVOC Center from the region who will represent the practitioner approach in the region, and the vet expert represented by CEDEFOP will give us some concrete findings. And we want a clear, dialogue has to take place, because without that we cannot get the full picture of it. This is a conversation between a researcher and practitioner. One is the dialogue, that's why symbiotic relation is important. Another is the conversation. Conversation, I want really a clear, like a provocative discussion. Not just to say, yeah, this is okay. No, whatever findings you are talking, this is not valid in Africa. In Africa, if you go there, this is the issue that you are talking. It's not issue, there is a different issue. I like to hear this kind of approach where we will have the breeding ground for this symbiotic relationship. And the last one, which is the most important, we are taking together most important agenda. I have traveled along all the places of the world, and I have received only one thing: attractiveness of Tibet is a universal concern. Earlier, it was seen as a developing country concern. Why? 20 years ago, if you ask me, that what is the reason why Tibet is not popular in the developing country or least developed country? Because poor infrastructure, teachers are not trained, equipments are backdated. These are all challenges. Still, these are valid. This is called persistent challenges. Okay, then after some time, we realize there is some emerging issue coming. Is there a sufficient apprenticeship scope in your country? Is private sector is engaged? Is there any issue on work-based learning? Then immediately you will say, yeah, these are all challenges. Up to this point, matter was a little easy, because it's very clear. You have no private sector, you have no work-based learning, you didn't do the work-based learning like the apprenticeship system. Let's place all this thing, Tibet will be fantastic in your country. Matter is not easy now. To me, there is a new challenge has come. That's why this meeting is significant. Why in Europe, developed country, initial enrollment in Tibet is declining? Do you have any answers? If there is an answer, it should be deep-rooted. Why, in spite of so many apprenticeship scope being given, why the young people still prefer first choice is the university education? There's a degree of difference. Some countries are doing well, I'm not saying that. But overall, to me, that places us in a very challenging situation. Interestingly, if you observe the world, there are two phenomena happening simultaneously. Tibet institution, because of STEM knowledge, more and more emerging occupations are coming, like mechatronics, nanotechnology, all this new biotechnology, ICT, Internet of Things. What is happening? The STEM knowledge to be integrated into the Tibet curriculum. So more and more institutes are, Tibet Institute is going towards higher level of qualification, integrating STEM knowledge into the Tibet curriculum. This is an interesting development is taking place, not only in Europe, worldwide. I can have evidence on that. On the other hand, university, those who are classically offering academics, they are encroaching in the Tibet. And they are offering Tibet program because employability is an issue. After getting university graduates, they are not getting job, they don't have the skill. And I've seen some of the university as just call it vocationalization of higher education. So academification of Tibet institution, vocationalization of higher education, merging together, creating a new space for all of us. This is a new world. That's why Tibet qualification being offered level 5, in some country level 6, which was classically on EQF model sent as a higher education. So the classical debate, the way we have done the attractiveness, I think is coming up with a new approach called learning permeability, greater approach. I can give you a clear instance. My son, I tried to convince him that why you don't take Tibet as an occupation. They are also doing that. He replied me, and that is really awakening. Later on I talked to many youth, they said, if you take Tibet occupation, it's looked like, like a narrow end, like I don't have not much options. I can be very skillful in one occupation, but I don't have any option. But the same thing, if I do in university, a computer scientist can be a financial analyst, they can be on management part, wider options are given to them. Why? This is a two treatment for two kind of education. I think that is creating a new environment to me. We will not hear from CEDEFOP. They have already taken a research changing role of it. There are many dimensions of it. We are eager to listen to them, and there is a marriage is happening now. It is a universal concern. And we are really, really a historic moment now. That's why breaking all the norms, all the conventions, the way rigidity, Europe, rest of the world coming together with researcher in one hand and practitioner together. I like to echo James' values, comment on that. It should be symbiotic relation. It is not just contesting, argument, but symbiotic. Researchers will be much gain to get a regional, what is happening. They have to look back their research. At the same time, practitioners have to see what researchers say is not all nonsense. There is substance to it. That's the new journey will begin, and I promise you, this is just starting of a big journey. We are taking a project with CEDEFOP together to study this one, and second half we will have a 2 workshop in that direction, and we will continue the relation, and I hope this one single step will create 1,000 steps for attractiveness of Tibet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comments, Dr. Majumdar. At this point, I would also like to invite Mr. Goey, who is from the WorldSkills International, to also, and he's the Vice President of Strategic Affairs.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. First of all, thank you for giving me and WorldSkills the opportunity to say a few things about WorldSkills. I'm always curious in audiences like this, how many of you know WorldSkills? Just a raise of hands. That's interesting, because that's a lot, I think. I'm in this job now for 15 years, so to say, and I can remember 15 years ago, most of the time in audiences like this, I still had to explain what WorldSkills was all about. But I'm still going to do that, if you don't mind. My name is Goey. I'm the Vice President for WorldSkills, elected in that role by the members. I'm also the official delegate for the Netherlands, and my daily job is being the CEO for WorldSkills Netherlands. So for those who are not familiar with WorldSkills, we are the global hub for skills excellence and development, and through international cooperation and development between industry, government, organizations and institutions, we promote the benefits and need for skilled professionals through skills competitions, grassroots community projects and knowledge exchange. We try to show how important skills education and training is for youth, industries and society by challenging young professionals around the world to become the best in the skill of their choice. Around 80 countries are member of WorldSkills, and this year our main event will be in Abu Dhabi, the 43rd WorldSkills competition, with more than 1,300 vet talents from around the world who will compete in more than 50 different skills. Now I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank our colleagues from the UAE, Mr. Mubarak and Mr. Al-Matsouki, who are here in this room, for taking up this year's organization. It's always a big challenge to organize an event like that. It's not a soccer match or whatever, where you have the pitch and the stadium, but these are different skills categories who represent the latest developments in their trades, which means a lot of industry involvement, a lot of sponsors, a lot of discussion with those sponsors completing this big event. But WorldSkills is more than a competition. The strategy within the organization is focused on 6 key areas: promoting skills, career building, education and training, international cooperation, research, and of course the skills competitions themselves. And research, I think today is a very interesting topic. To bring practitioners in contact with research, I think WorldSkills could play a role in that towards the future as well. Since a few years we are seeking more and more partnership with other organizations on national, regional and global level to increase the impact of the work done on different levels and to mutually be more effective in raising the importance and attractiveness of VET. One of the examples is the Conference Coalition, in which global organizations like UNESCO and WorldSkills are working together to set a high-quality conference program during the WorldSkills competition. So it's not only the competition, it is a hub, and I think Peter Thiele a few years ago said to me, this is an opportunity to create an ongoing promotion of that and exchange of knowledge around the globe. One of the initiatives, like the World Youth Skills Day, the reason why we are here today, is an instrument to work together for us. It inspires and motivates also our members to be active on skills promotion. And I think Shyamal already mentioned a few of the activities going around the globe being organized by skills organizations in partnership with UNESCO offices in their country. And to give you an example of some of the activities which took place last weekend, celebrating World Youth Skills Day, for example, in China, there was a celebration in Kunming City, the capital of Yunnan province, with high-level officials and supporters. In Finland, they raised the importance of youth skills development at Suomi Arena, the largest annual meeting place for politicians and organizations in Finland. Korean, Japanese and Chinese Taipei competitors were in Taiwan for a mini skills competition. In Ireland, they used World Youth Skills Day as their official launch to promote a new program designed to widen participation from non-traditional entry to apprenticeship programs. In Palestine, the Federation of Palestinian Chambers of Commerce and Industry and the Palestine Skills were celebrating the day with the Minister of Labour and the Minister of Education to officially introduce to the media the WorldSkills Palestine team for WorldSkills Abu Dhabi 2017. And in Abu Dhabi, they hosted a youth circle to discuss the major water challenges facing their communities, if I'm informed correctly, Mr. Moore. So most of the time in these activities, former champions from previous competitions play an important role. Successful young role models, successful young VET students are the best role models for promoting VET and to positively influence society. And I'm so glad that we brought 2 of them today here together for you to be active in the afternoon, or in the morning session, sorry. It's from the WorldSkills 2013 competition in Leipzig, Germany, Tobias Becher. If you could stand up just to identify yourself. Tobias is a recent champion from restaurant service, and with him is a Dutch welder, Richard Rolvink. Richard, if you could stand up. Richard participated in the previous WorldSkills competition in Sao Paulo in 2015. I'm not fully aware of your results, but did you win any medals? Not yet. But it's not important. It's the journey which is important. But the good thing also is that their journey continues, because at the moment they will be in Abu Dhabi being experts, judging, assessing the work from the new competitors in the competition. Today is also important to look at research. It was already mentioned a few times, and in our key areas, research plays an important role towards the future. It is also one of the actions mentioned in our strategic plan, in our action plan following the strategic plan, where it states that we want to work with members to identify and map all significant VET research bodies and invite key bodies to form a research advisory board to help WorldSkills seek, understand and use and support TVET research. That's a very strong and important statement. So this is also a call to the organizations working on research to seek cooperation with WorldSkills and see what we can do on the topic together towards the future. I would like to conclude by wishing you and us all a successful conference here and hope to see you in Abu Dhabi in October, where the world of VET will come together to celebrate TVET and to promote TVET during the WorldSkills competition. So thank you for your attention and see you in Abu Dhabi.
Well, true to the convention, one always has to adjust the microphone after a Dutchman speaks. But thank you so much for your welcome notes, Mr. Goey. At this point, I would like to invite Ms. Miki Nozawa, who's our program specialist at the UNESCO-UNEVOC, to also present the UNEVOC photo competition that we organized as part of our WorldSkills observation. Ms. Miki Nozawa.
Good morning, everyone. So on behalf of UNESCO-UNEVOC, I'm very pleased to announce the winners of the photo competition, Skills in Action, that we organized at the occasion of World Youth Skills Day. So this photo competition focuses on three thematic areas: contribution of skills to youth employment and entrepreneurship, and to promote equity and gender equality, and to facilitate the transition to sustainable economies and societies. So we have received more than 250 submissions, and we'd like to thank all those young and less young people who have contributed for their contribution to share their skills in photography with us. And we'd like to take this opportunity also to thank our UNEVOC network members throughout the world and also other partners for mobilizing people in their countries to encourage them to submit these photos. So there are many amazing photos with very strong messages, and it was very difficult to select, but we have selected 20 finalists among them. Okay, so this is a photo which gathered more than 7,000 likes as of last Friday. There you go. So the title of the photo is Tibet Skills That Shape a Better Destiny, and the photographer is Mr. Emmanuel Nduwayezu from Rwanda. So Emmanuel said the mission of Tibet is to improve skills for sustainable progress, especially targeting youth. So now it's second place winner, which shows particular importance on the skills we should value as part of our culture and heritage. So the photographer is Mr. Bishoka Ulmi from Nepal. And Bishoka believes that this heritage skill, which was handed down from many generations, is now in danger of being lost. He believes that there is a need to promote and encourage youth to take on these traditional skills so this skill will not be lost forever. So now it's time for the first winner. So the title of the photo is Female Aircraft Engineer, photographed by Ms. Eitayo Oyelowo of Nigeria. Eitayo described this profession as dominated by men, not only in her country, Nigeria, but across the globe. Clearly, this photo shows a female aircraft engineer that has changed the cliché and shows women have started standing up for equal opportunities and build careers in male-dominated industries, thereby inspiring many others to follow. UNESCO-UNEVOC will send these prize winners the prizes and certificates, and the winning photos and those of finalists will be promoted through our UNESCO-UNEVOC work and channels. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks for that. At this point, I'd like to get to the main part of today's event. I'd like to invite Ms. Simone Lankhorst. She's a journalist with the WDR and has also previously been working with the Deutsche Welle. She will be the moderator of today's discussion and walkthrough. The first part of this discussion would only be focused on the researchers, for whom we have Mr. Loukas Zahilas from CEDEFOP and Mr. Jens Bjornavold also from the CEDEFOP. After that, we'll have a short break, and then we'll return back with inputs and insights from the people belonging to where the rubber meets the road, right? So from here on, Simone, it's yours.
Okay, then I think I will come through. Good morning, everybody. Before we start, I do have some administrative duties. So everybody who hasn't set his phone on mute, I would kindly ask to do that as a courtesy to our speakers. And is there anybody who is missing a handout? Because there were some people coming in a little bit later. Yes, I think my colleagues can take care of that. And there are handouts on the seats. So, because in these handouts you find all the background information and the bios of the panelists. So I won't be introducing everybody too long. And as you know, we are going live on Facebook by now, and we are on Twitter. So by using the hashtag WYSDBonn, I think that's right, Zubair, is it WYSDBonn? Yes. You can post your questions online too. So everybody who's watching us can post his questions, and everybody who doesn't want to raise his hand in the panel, he can do that as well. So I'm an exception to the phones, because my phone will be beeping, because I'm getting all the Twitter questions directly on my phone. But it will be on mute. But so I'm not rude, I'm not chatting with a friend or somebody, it is the Twitter questions I will be posing. So I will tell you briefly what you can expect from the session this morning. As we all know, the topic is researchers meeting practitioners and how to enhance the attractiveness of Tibet. And as we all just had coffee and breakfast and our concentration level is still high, we will start with the input the researchers will give us. And to be honest, to me, the topic of international Tibet was kind of new, and I was kind of shocked when I learned that there are more than 1 million young people unemployed all over the world, and 40 million people entering the market again every year, looking for a job for the first time. And then when I think of my friends and who have a Tibet education, who went to university, then it's quite clear, like I think for every country, that everybody wants to have an academic degree, and that there are like kind of social stigmata to Tibet education still. Like that is often considered like a dead-end education or even second-rate education. And this is why I think this is really important to talk about what could make Tibet more attractive. And what the scientific side has found out about that, we will be listening to in a minute. After that, we will have a short break, have tea and coffee, and then we have the actual debate starting. And after that debate, and I will assure you, I will make time for that. I will be very German with the time. There's a Q&A session, and I hope that you have a lot of questions to ask. Yes. I will be the master of time today. I try to. So my name is Simone Lankhorst. I'm working mainly as an editor and reporter for German Public Broadcasting Service, WDR. And I feel very honored to moderate the panel today, and I'm looking forward to an interesting and, as Mr. Majumdar stated, a very provocative this debate. And we will now be listening to the presentation by Dr. Loukas Zahilas from Greece, who is head of the Department for Vet Systems and Institutions at CEDEFOP. So please welcome Mr. Zahilas.
So good morning from my side, and I want to thank first of all Shyamal, UNEVOC, of course our director and our governing board that actually made a reality today. That means made something that exists after discussing for many months and trying to find a way to create an event that would bring theory close to practice. Actually, I feel that I'm not completely representing the research part, because half of my life I was working in the implementation side. So in reality, if I have to follow the symbiotic approach, I have to have an approach for myself, first of all, trying to balance the two dimensions that coexist in relation to theory and practice. But of course, I strongly believe that what we are missing is exactly this communication, this clear way to bring what research presents into everyday practice, into reality. And of course, taking into account the complications, the complicated environment we are living in, this creates the majority of the problems that we're trying somehow to solve. So the event today is actually touching this area. And I consider that attractiveness is in reality a battering ram, because it opens doors and it links to many other issues and areas, like, for example, the role of stakeholders, the role of the societies, of cultures, of traditions, the necessity to inform, to guide, the need to look to the future. All these are somehow in attractiveness. And that is why I want actually, first of all, to give a general background of how we see this attractiveness in Tibet or VET, then to discuss a few results that we had in our way so far, because CEDEFOP, the agency I'm representing, has been working in this area for a number of years. Before passing the floor to my colleague Jens, we will go actually into the details of the latest project that, as it was already mentioned, tries to look into all these challenges. So we all know that we are living in an interesting but also challenging world, and globalization, migration, Internet of Things, global warming, the necessity to green our world, to green Tibet, the necessity to tackle the problems of old ages are issues that are actually change the traditional way we are thinking and our everyday life, I could say. And what is very important is that although we are actually discussing here people that are working in education, people that in reality have to do with change, I still consider that what Aldous Huxley in his Brave New World quoted is still very valid. That means most human beings have an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted. Although we are talking about change, in reality, when we are moving to the implementation of change, then things are quite different. How to persuade, for example, people that their work is moving to another landscape, a quite different landscape, because education and training are no longer, and the labor market are no longer the way that they used to be a few years, not to mention a few decades ago. We have moved to an era of micro-learning, getting news and information from various sources, from smart devices, and the way that knowledge and skills are acquired is so different. Millennials of the new generations have grown up with all these devices, and they are feeling comfortable by using them, and in reality they expect and demand from us another approach in all areas that touch to learning, education, training. And this problem is not a problem that we can say we can observe in specific parts of our small world. If we go even in Europe, we can see that the facts and figures create big challenges. For example, European cooperation, we are proud that is progressing, but still today we're in the middle of a crisis in a number of states, and we still have more than 22 million people that are unemployed. 4.5 million of them are youth unemployed, and 24% of them, of the working age population, do not have at least upper secondary education. And just 29% hold a tertiary degree. It is estimated that 62.8 million of low-qualified adults do not participate in education and training, and by 2025, this is very important, 48.7% of all job openings in Europe will require high qualifications. More or less 40%, which is a big number, will require medium qualifications, and 11.5% low qualifications. So the majority of qualifications that are linked to TVET are still there. There is a need for them, and also for the years to come. It is also expected that by 2060 the European Union will move from having 4 working age people for every person aged above 65 years old to about 2 working age persons. And the working population will drop down from 306 million to 269. This creates a landscape that is quite threatening, I would say, because data, everything shows that we are actually called to find and propose new ideas, new solutions. And these solutions can be addressed, of course, at the level of European cooperation, but also at national level. Let's see what Europe tries to do. We have, of course, as the majority, I suppose, know, the new skills agenda. The European Commission adopted this comprehensive skills agenda for Europe, aiming to address the new challenges and ensure that people will develop a broad set of skills from early on in life so as to make the most of Europe's human capital. Among the 10 actions to help people in Europe, one is clearly linked to the content, to the theme of our workshop today. It's about making VET a first choice. That means by enhancing opportunities for VET learners to undertake a work-based learning in the majority of cases, a work-based learning experience, and promote greater visibility of good labor market outcomes of VET. This is the main idea. So at the European level, we have, at the level of the European Commission, the skills agenda. But I represent CEDEFOP, and if I don't want to ask if everybody of you knows CEDEFOP, but just to be on the safe side, I can say that we are, as our director mentioned, the oldest European agency. Our idea is to support the member states, the social partners, and the European Commission in designing and implementing policies for world-class and inclusive VET. And what we're trying to do is to balance and to work in the very sensitive area between education and training and the labor market. We believe that in reality we are supporting a process that is a circle, shaping, valuing, and informing VET. And our different activities try to have a different element. They have an element of bringing new evidence, new knowledge, that means the research part of our activities. We also analyze and monitor policy developments, that's something very important at European level. And of course, we try, taking into account our resources, to help as much as possible or to work as a knowledge broker. So in CEDEFOP, we have worked also in the past in relation to, in many different projects in relation to attractiveness of the VET. And that is why I can just briefly mention to you a number of ideas or suggestions that we had in the work so far. I'm not including what will be presented in the next slides by my colleague Jens Bjornavold in the next presentation. Suggestions or ideas that would help raising the attractiveness of TVET is providing easier access to higher education through a VET route. It was already mentioned by Shyamal somehow in relation to the profile of his son when he was discussing about the opportunities and ideas how to move further on. Campaigns to attract young people to VET. Also, this is another way to raise the attractiveness. Improvement to guidance and counseling services. You will see that one of the main gaps, one of the main problems is the information, the channel that information comes to the citizens. And also including VET elements into lower secondary education. Of course, what is always there in relation to raising the attractiveness of VET is work-based learning and apprenticeship. So, VET needs to be appealing, credible alternative option to general routes, and it should be a really nice, a good option for any of the learners that decide not to take the general education stream. We had also from a study that we had back in 2013, we presented the influencing factors of TVET. In these influencing factors, you can see in the graph, in reality, are linked to quality, relevancy, recognition, and employability. It is very important to improve the quality and relevance of skills formation, because this is linked also, something that is linked also to innovation, so as to make skills and qualifications more visible, comparable, and relevant to the labor market. There is also need to increase skills intelligence and information for better career choices leading to recognition, better career prospects, and status in the society. All these are dimensions that are very important and should be taken into account. Finally, the link to employability in the majority of cases this has an easy pathway through apprenticeship or work-based learning, is one of the main influencing factors improving at the very end the quality of life of the learner. As already it was mentioned, the main menu of the day will be the changing nature and role of VET study. Parallel to this study in CEDEFOP, in 2016, we had the first ever opinion survey aimed at investigating European citizens' opinion on VET. In reality, this is an ongoing project, an ambitious one, because we had a total of 35,600 more or less interviews conducted among the citizens of all member states, and the survey provides data and opinions in relation to awareness, attractiveness, and effectiveness of VET in Europe. The main concepts surveyed in relation to VET at upper secondary level were awareness and knowledge, attractiveness and access, satisfaction and experience, outcomes and effectiveness. Through the survey, we can have insight in areas such as levels of participation in VET, people's interpretation of what VET is, people's ideas on information and guidance, factors for choosing an educational path, satisfaction with acquired key competencies, perception of the education system's permeability, and of vocational education's role in society. I will just focus, because I had already a threat about respecting my time, I will focus just in 3 slides from this survey, and one has to do in relation to the image of VET. So, most Europeans, 71%, know that what VET is, and 2 out of 3, that means 68%, have a positive opinion of it. And also, actually, 87% of VET graduates are happy with the work-related skills they have acquired following a VET route. However, the situation is quite complicated. There is always a problem when we are considering VET in relation to general education. So, VET as a second option. If the question focuses on the second choice, then you get replies like, in our country, general education has a more positive image. And then we see that the percentages are strongly in favor of general education. Or students with lower grades are directed to VET. So the problems, although VET has a positive image, we can still see that when it is compared with general education, we still have inconsistencies. And because the results of the study would require a big workshop to go into the details, it is very interesting to see one of the main problems that has to do with the access of information. Because when the interviewees were asked, at the time you were making a decision about upper secondary level of education, were you given information about that? 50% had little information, and this reflects the group that followed a general education route, and 72% of those that followed a VET route were informed. That means it's an unbalance between the level of information provided, and this is one of the areas that we should have to look in the years to come, and as soon as possible, I could say. So, with this I want just to have some final reflection. I use this slide, it's Snoopy, and there is an interesting dialogue. I've always wondered why you decided to be a dog. And he replies, I was fooled by the job description. Actually, this fooled is one of the reasons that we have the lack of attractiveness in VET. And there are many ways of improving the image of VET, which go as far as to structural reforms to improve the quality and the relevance of VET. For example, Increasing quality is important, but it's not enough on its own. So we know we have also to change opinions and perceptions in relation to VET. Not only to the candidates, but also to the families and to the whole societies. There is a need for targeted measures to improve the image of VET through information provision, promotional activities, and role models. These activities should aim to reach young people and their families, as well as school staff, employers, and the wider public. Because what we need is to increase the reputation to have a more appealing VET. I want just to, because the role model is one of the ideas, that means to present positive cases, people that have a VET background and they became very successful. There is James mentioned Einstein, I will mention a footballer. So, the famous Brazilian footballer Pelé mentioned that success is no accident. It is hard work, persistence, learning, studying, sacrifice, and most of all, love of what you are doing or learning to do. So, this is about VET. We should be exactly moved to this perspective. And of course, what I want to suggest to you is just to have a look to our website, and you can find plenty of information on all the issues that were just briefly touched by me. And of course, you will have the opportunity now to move to an in-depth presentation of our latest project on the changing role of VET. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Loukas Zahilas. And next is your colleague Jens Bjornavold from CEDEFOP based in Brussels. He's a senior expert, and he is actually having a look back on what has changed over the last decades, and he is actually working on a qualification framework for the European Union. So.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to share our ongoing work with such a distinguished group of people, and we certainly also look forward to your reactions to what we are doing. As you see, what I will speak about here today is actually an ongoing project. It's a project we started already back in 2015. It's a project which goes on now, but for a long time it won't finish until 2018. On the other hand, it's also a kind of an activity which I think is something which CEDEFOP is doing also further on in a way beyond this particular project, because it's really looking into what is happening with vocational education training in Europe, and hopefully what I will say about Europe is also relevant beyond Europe. So this is the study, and what we are trying to do, in a way I listened to what Loukas said, our kind of capacity to take things for granted. Sometimes I think this is quite dangerous, and I think it's dangerous in relation to vocational education and training, because what we are trying to do with this particular study is to take one step back. We try to actually look at what has happened over the last couple of decades to get a deeper understanding. How is the vocational education training system, in a way, itself changing? How are its characteristics? What kind of dynamics can we observe in vocational education training as such? The other thing is, of course, the relationship between vocational education training and other parts of education and training. Higher education, general education, what is the relationship between these sectors in a way? But of course, what is very important is what kind of impact has external factors on vocational education and training. The demographic developments, the economic cycles, the changes in occupational structure. What does this mean for vocational education and training? So it's quite an ambitious project, but the point is to better understand, well, what do we see now happening to vocational education training? Is our taken for granted assumptions about vocational education training actually correct? Or is it something else happening? So the focus is on development, it's on reform, it's on change over the last 2 decades. We are focusing on the 28 member states of the EU, and as well as Norway and Iceland. So it's 30 countries we look at. I will just briefly take you through these different work assignments, because there are 6 work assignments. What I will mainly focus on through my speech here is point 1. It's on the mapping of how is vocational education and training actually defined. How is it conceptualized in these 30 countries, and how is these definitions, these conceptualizations actually changing? That gives us an interesting insight into the changing nature and role of it. But this is only the starting point of the project, because I will just briefly take you through the other elements which we are working on for the moment. First of all, it's this analysis of how external factors, notably demographic developments, changes in occupational structure, are actually influencing vocational education training. We will in the next few months publish the first papers showing this, and in particular the demographic developments are important to understand the changes in that, but I won't go into detail on this now. A third element of this project is actually quite important, because it's analyzing developments of initial vocational education training in Europe, what we term EQF levels 3 and 4 basically, because the rumor, or what many people are saying, is that vocational education training is declining. It's under serious pressure. The number of people in the vocational education training system is actually becoming smaller. We have been looking very carefully at the statistics, actually going back to the national level to see what is actually happening. And I think what we can conclude already now, that the rumor that vocational education training is kind of disappearing is wrong. We actually see a much more stable situation over the last 20 years than kind of official European statistics show. And there are many reasons for that. Some of them are due to definitions of what is VET and what is not VET. But I think when we look carefully at the numbers, the situation regarding VET is perhaps more stable than we thought. In some countries there's more pressure, but I think in the majority of countries actually VET is holding the fort in them. So that's interesting. There's also some findings to be published now quite in the next few months. The fourth part of this project is about vocational education training as lifelong learning. And we have been particularly focusing on what kind of learning pathways are developing, from initial VET to continuing VET, what kind of learning pathways are in a way existing and developing from young people to adult people, an important topic, still ongoing process. A fifth part of this I find very interesting actually, because it's the analysis of vocational education training at higher levels, above EQF level 5. And I think Shyamal actually mentioned something about this, because what we see is, one thing is that you develop now particular VET institutions and VET programs at high levels, but what we also see is what we term a kind of vocational drift in higher education in universities, that practice-oriented education, training, learning is becoming more important in universities, in higher education institutions. So we are sort of looking at this tension between what we call academic drift and vocational drift. And this is really a very significant part of the kind of changing role of vocational education and training, and something we think will become more important in the years to come. And the final part of this project, and then to try to use these data, these different perspectives to see what kind of future possible development paths can we observe, what kind of scenarios can we look into. Our plan is to publish results from these different work assignments as they come along. We won't wait until the end of the project, so the results of the project will be made available as soon as they are ready from our side, and we hope that we will use these results, and of course it will be interesting in an international setting to discuss the relevance, but also what this means also beyond Europe. So I will go then back to what was point 1 in my kind of listing of work assignments, and that is, how do we understand vocational education and training? So what we started with was to try to think, well, what kind of analytical model do we need in order to understand vocational education training in Europe? Because what we observe is that vocational education training in Europe takes many forms. It's in many ways the most heterogeneous education training sectors compared to general education, higher education, and so on. We also see that vocational education training is very difficult to grasp as a single institutional entity. And in many cases, we see that it overlaps with other sectors. So this creates problems in a way identifying what is actually vocational education and training. So what we said is that to understand what vocationally oriented education and training is, we need a more multifaceted approach, where we combine three perspectives. First of all, we need to look at the more pedagogical, epistemological perspective. What kind of learning forms are we speaking about? Second, we need to look at the systems, the institutions. What kind of institutions are actually delivering vocational education and training? And the third one is actually a socio-economic labor market perspective. What is the relationship between this education training and the world outside? And when you combine these three perspectives, then you start suddenly to see more what is the core of vocational education and training. Because I think traditionally we have been looking at the institutions, the system, the providers, the delivery, and that is important. But without these other elements, you actually have problems in understanding what is vocational education and training and also how is it changing. So this is just a picture. I don't expect you to read all these things, but in a way linked to these three circles, these three perspectives, you see a lot of different topics emerging. And that is what in a way is coming out of this project, because let's say if you choose this more kind of pedagogical to focus on the learning forms, in a way that gives you access to very important issues. The same when you look at the systems, the institutions. I won't go into this. I guess the note with this presentation will be distributed. You can have a closer look at it. But it's the combination of these three circles is actually quite a powerful tool to understand what vocationally oriented education training is. So I will not go into detail on that. So what we did for this first work assignment was that we prepared a survey to vocational education training experts in all the 30 countries. So what we asked them to help us was to look at the developments the last 20 years, basically from 1995 and until today, and say, well, how is vocational education training defined? How is it conceptualized? And how has this changed over these 2 decades? What we got from this survey was quite interesting. It's of course a first starting point for the project. It's something we will follow up, but it gives us a glimpse into changes, into the situation as regards vocational education training in the different countries. So, in a way, we speak about 30 genuinely different vocational education training systems in Europe. I mean, the national characteristics, specificities are quite strong in a way. So you see that countries have developed their own models. In a way, on the basis of these 30 generally different systems or approaches, we can in a way identify 4 or 5 main categories. I won't go into detail in this, but in a way just list them. In a way, first of all, of course, vocational education training understood as work-based learning, more the kind of dual system approach you find here in Germany. We also find models more focused on the education side, more clear kind of school-based systems. I mean, I can mention examples like Sweden, but we also find mixed version of school, more apprenticeship-based system. Another neighboring country to Sweden, for example, Norway has this kind of mixed model. We also see vocational education training understood as further training, less clearly defined. Ireland, UK might point in this direction, but also we see vocational education training developing more in the direction of lifelong learning. Finland is perhaps a good example of that, but I won't go into detail of this, but I think the point here, we see very big differences between the 30 countries, but some main models. So what are the kind of changing conceptions and changing realities we observe in Europe? I think the survey points to some important changes in the conception of vocational education. I will list some of them. What is interesting is to see that there is certainly an increased overall emphasis on practical knowledge and practical learning. That's a very strong kind of message across the board. We also see a strong diversification of vocational education and training. And we see in a way a kind of an expansion of vocationally oriented education training, both to lower levels and to higher level. I mentioned higher education, you see strong tendencies in this direction, but you also see vocational education training developing at lower levels for those with low skills and linking to, for example, people at risk on employment. We also see new vocational education training pathways for adults. I mean, this lifelong learning dimension is quite clear. We also see in some countries actually efforts to try to address this question of parity of esteem, the balance between general education, vocational education training. And there are some interesting cases where countries actually have an active policy to try to address this. And I think this is interesting to look at these examples, because countries are not passive. They are aware of this and trying to take action in some cases. What we also see is that there is a very clear shift towards what we call learning outcomes and competence-based approaches in all countries. So when you define a qualification, you say, well, what is expected from the candidate? What is he or she supposed to do to understand and is supposed to know? So that's quite important and something we see across the board. So this is perhaps difficult to read here, but in a way what we observe, and here we use these three perspectives, the kind of the pedagogical, the institutions, and the link to the labor market. So we see in a way two tendencies. First of all, we see this kind of expansion or diversification of vocational education training, and I mentioned examples of that. Expansion into higher levels, expansion into the kind of levels 5, 6, 7, 8. We see also the kind of expansion of this kind of practice-based orientation. We also see this kind of strengthening and intensification of certain aspects, and I think this practice-based focus is becoming stronger in many countries. It's somehow becoming apparent to policymakers and to stakeholders that this is a very important aspect of vocational education and training, which in some cases has been missing from let's say, higher education, which makes, for example, some of the university programs less relevant to the labor. So this kind of expansion, diversification on the one hand, but also strengthening and intensification of certain kind of core VET issues is something we certainly notice in many countries. And I think this is quite important, because it shows that there is a lot of kind of conscience about what are the qualities of vocational education training, and we see that it is being reflected in policies and in the changes in the VET system. Again, I mean, we will distribute our papers and also these PowerPoints. You can look at this more in detail. I won't have the time to go into detail, but you see how we use the model in where this more kind of multifaceted approach to VET to try to understand. And this is the same here in where we were looking, well, what was the situation before 1995? What is the situation today? And what are the possible kind of developments we see into the future? And it's along the same line, this kind of diversification, but also kind of strengthening of focus on certain VET aspects. And this is quite something we can see throughout the different countries. And I would perhaps emphasize one particular point here. What has in particular happened to the European VET system, let's say if we look at the situation before 1905 and today, and that's the issue of permeability. Efforts to try to avoid this kind of dead-end situation, because many of the systems you had at early day were quite narrow in their focus. They were sort of dead ends, and you see really strong efforts to try to change the systems to open up towards permeability. I don't say that this has been succeeded But you can see that the intentions, the policy intentions, the intentions of the systems is clearly to try to open up. And also what we see is that there is a kind of broadening of the focus of vocational education training. Well, you could see that in early days you had a very narrow kind of technical specific focus. You see a broadening now of the focus where what you could call softer skills, transversal skills, a broader kind of knowledge approach is becoming more common. And you see also that the number of programs or the number of profiles is actually decreasing. So going from a very high number of, let's say, qualifications, the general tendency is that we're reducing these to broader areas. And I think that is pointing in the same direction, a kind of broadening. Because, I mean, that has to do with change, because technical specific skills are changing due to technological and changes in society. So you need to be prepared for this change. You need to have a broader skills bases, knowledge bases, and this we in a way can see in the way the systems institutions are changing. So these are quite interesting observations. So what are the implications then for policy, implications for this relationship between research and practitioners we are speaking about here? I think first of all, to operate on the basis of a too narrow conception of vocational education and training can reduce the relevance and impact of policies. If we understand vocational education training only as kind of apprenticeship training at upper secondary level, initial training in a traditional form, I think that that's a problem. Because when we use this multifaceted approach, combining the focus on learning on institutions, the link to the labor market, we see a much broader area of vocationally oriented education and training. So perhaps we need to speak about vocationally oriented education and training rather than to speak about it as a very distinct and kind of fenced in area of vocational education and training. We also see that the traditional distinction between subsectors of education and training, vocationally, higher education, general education, actually is causing problems. Because how we see that a lot of new programs at upper secondary level combine vocationally and general education. And what is that defined as vocationally or general education? That is actually one of the problems with statistics. New programs, are they defined as VET or are they defined as something else? So that is really a problem in terms of getting precise statistics. I think also we need to look at how will the education training system as a whole, not only as kind of silos, but how can it as a whole promote vocationally oriented education and training? Because we normally discuss VET as separate things, higher education, universities as a separate thing, general education as a separate. And I think that's a mistake. You need to see how can these actually interact, because that has to do with permeability, that has to do with learning pathways, that has to do with opening up. So this kind of more holistic understanding of education training policies where VET is an essential element is quite important. And this is my final slide. And I think also we need to be aware that this expansion, this diversification I indicated to you previously, of course also can be seen as a kind of fragmentation, as something reducing the transparency of the system, making it more difficult for people at risk, or perhaps people who don't have this kind of access to guidance and information. And this is important. So how to increase the transparency of the systems, how to make it possible for people to actually orient themselves and maneuver through these very complex and increasingly complex systems of vocational education, or vocationally oriented education and training. I think that is also linked to this whole issue of lifelong learning, because understanding vocationally oriented education training as lifelong learning is quite essential. When you look at the demographic developments in Europe, this is really an essential thing. And it's linked to permeability, it's linked to learning careers, it's linked to this opening up. So finally, I would say that this expansion, this diversification of what we have described here is of course playing out different in the different European countries. So in a way, each country have to consider how they will address this. But I think from the survey we have now reported, we see quite a clear picture that is changing. It is becoming broader, it's becoming more open. There are still a lot of issues, and I think as Loukas presented, I mean, the perception of VET as a kind of second choice is of course problematic, but I think there is a basis here for changing the conception and the understanding of it as something much more open, something much more permeable, something which really allows people to build on it also for future careers. So these were some of the points, and I hope that you will go back to our publications and the more detailed presentation of this, but at least it gives a glimpse into what we hope will be a kind of a useful input to the discussion of vocational education and training. It's certainly changing, that's for sure, so thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for all your input. I think we have now a lot of information to digest, and this is exactly what we can do during our 15 minutes break. So there is tea and coffee outside and some croissants left, I think, and then we will start the debate and get back to work, okay? So now we will actually start the discussion, and I will introduce you to the people you haven't met before. And this is, ladies first of course, sitting next to me is Mrs. Funmilayo, Doherty from Nigeria. And actually she's so active in the field of promoting TVET, I will only name some of her activities, otherwise I will be going on for an hour or so. And she has a PhD in environmental toxicology and pollution management, and is a senior lecturer at Yaba College of Technology in Lagos. She coordinated the UNEVOC Center in Nigeria for 3 years and successfully organized the ever WorldSkills Day there. And she says one opportunity to make TVET more attractive is to address the media and maybe even to establish a TVET ambassador. Welcome, Ms. Doherty. So maybe you have a quick statement on what the researchers presented. Would you like to answer to that? Yes, I give you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I haven't listened to the researchers. They've done quite a lot of work on trying to know exactly how people, the perception, what is the definition of VET. And even in my country, I'll speak from the Nigerian context. In my country, TVET means so many things. Formal, informal. I mean, when you talk about TVET, people don't see TVET as an institution, like a formal institution. They see TVET in so many ways, and that's one of the reasons why the perception is very, very low. The perception is very, very low. And again, the higher education right now, some of them are incorporating vocational studies, technical studies into their curriculum, just like what he had said.
Thank you very much. We will elaborate on that a little bit later. Next, I would like to introduce you to Ms. Calleja from Greece. And she actually has a TVET background because she is a trained restorer of antiquities and restorer of works of art, which I learned are two completely different things. And she is founder and director of Hellenic Youth Participations based in Athens. It's an NGO which focuses on vocational training, and they are offering, for example, special summer camps on kind of an informal level, right? And she says one issue, like I think everybody working for an NGO knows that, is funding. And she says that what labor markets actually need is less scientists and more TVET graduates. Welcome, Calleja.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and share my experience with you and learn from you also. What I would like to say is that VET is in Greece is supposed to be a career that students follow when they fail to go to university. After finishing university studies, What we see now is that there's a huge unemployment on people that have a lot of degrees. On the other hand, people that are finishing vocational training are more likely to be employed directly, as in my case, I did it when I finished my vocational training. In the next day, I got a job. What I would like to mention is that we need to offer equal opportunities for university and vocational training graduates in the perception of having the same equal rights to do European projects, like Erasmus, like internships. We also need to adapt it in vocational training, and I think this will be offered a lot and help to be more attractive.
Thank you, Kelly. Next on the panel is Mr. Jefferson Azevedo. He flew in all the way from Brazil, and he is professor and rector of the Fluminense Federal Institute in the Rio de Janeiro state. He is teaching for more than 23 years at different levels of TVET, and he's also coordinator of the UNEVOC Center of CONIF, that is the National Council of Institutions of TVET in Brazil. And when I talked to him in preparation for this panel, he really sticks out when we were talking about attractiveness, because he said attractiveness of TVET itself is not an issue in Brazil. On the contrary, over the last decades, TVET was used as a tool to overcome poverty, to get the use of the streets. And he said, for example, at his institution there's no tuition fee, and every year they have more than 20,000 applicants, but only 2,000 places. So welcome, Mr. Jefferson, that will be interesting.
Thank you, Simone. And I would like to say in one statement, if it's possible, my impression about the research. I want to congratulate the research, but for attractiveness to that, it's important to define a technical and technological pathway. Lifelong learning in technological field is so attractive because in the new jobs are merging the concept, the theory, and the practical. The practical theory is coming together for the future jobs. And I couldn't agree more with some reflections about the need to construct a pathway. It's so important, and it's make the TVET more attractiveness for the young people, youth people.
Thank you, Mr. Azevedo. Before you can answer to that, I would like you to introduce you to Mr. Voss from Berlin. He's head of unit in the Department of Vocational Education and Training within the German Confederation of Skilled Crafts and Small Businesses. You know, in Germany we have a rather long history of TVET, especially when it comes to crafts. And in his organization, they have more than 40 crafts associations, and they are responsible for more than 130 different professions, like from hairdressing over car mechatronic to carpentry. So welcome, Mr. Voss. Do you have a short statement on what the researchers just said to us?
Yes, of course. What I found interesting is the historical remarks you made. So basically, TVET was some kind of dead end, and now we are in progress to developing a lifelong learning process to establish permeability to higher education system. But for me, the important thing is that you insisted on that we still do need two different education systems. So we don't need only one higher education, so a university education system. We need to keep the tradition, but we have to make the two systems adaptable. Permeability was one remark, and I think that's very interesting because that basically is what we did in Germany, that we allowed participants from TVET to move to a university, to reduce the time they need to study there, to accept what they have learned already, and to open pathways in both systems. that was very interesting, very important in general.
I would like to ask you directly another question, because it is interesting. It's kind of contrary to what happens in Brazil, for example, because in Germany the unemployment rate among the youth is quite still low, less than 5%, but still we have less apprentices than places offered. Could you tell us why?
Yeah, it is basically we have the same developments in Germany than in all other countries. We have, well, not in all other countries. We have a demographic change, so basically there are no young people anymore in some regions, or not the ones we need. Of course, we have what we call academization, or you call it academic trend. Of course, in Germany as well, young people, parents would like their kids go to university instead of vocational education. So we have decrease from the rate. We have about 50-50, 50% going to vocational education and 50% going to university. And the third thing is that our 3 years in-company training programs are very dense. We have this technological development that it's not only to get young people from the streets, to get off the streets, but to train them in their profession. And with these 3 years training programs, they're very elaborated. So these three trends, academization, demographic change, and technological development are, in a way, a problem in Germany, that a lot of companies offer training places for young people, but we do not have enough young people come to vocational education and going to university instead.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I would like to ask Loukas or Jens, like according to your findings, of course migration is a problem, can be a problem, or youth unemployment, the crisis in Greece, for example. So what are your findings for this? Jens starts, okay.
Well, what we see in the European context, because there's been a lot of kind of internal migration within Europe, I mean, particularly from the new member states into, let's say, northern countries, and so that has had an impact on vocational education and training in a way that, in particular, traditional kind of trades in construction has been under pressure in a way that less kind of young people from the country actually take these routes in a way, because the labor market, a lot of migrants come in. So these are perhaps, these are long-term trends, I don't know, but there are challenges to the national systems in coping with this migration. But I think what I would like to comment is perhaps some of the thing was mentioned here by the panel in a way, and I think that is this focus on pathways, because I think that has to do really with whether it's attractive for young people. Because what we have seen is that, formally speaking, countries have opened up their routes. I mean, you have the possibility now to enter into higher education. The numbers so far are perhaps small. So still there are kind of barriers, perhaps culturally or traditionally, to move on. So I think really what we need to think about, and what countries need to do, is to think, how can you promote real kind of lifelong learning careers and make more visible these lifelong learning careers linked to vocational education and training. I think that was mentioned by several. And that is still a problem, how to go from the formal opening up of the system to the real opening up, to the real lifelong learning. Because when you do that, when that becomes clear to young people, then of course that becomes much more attractive. So I think we are in the middle of a kind of a change process which can go both ways. So I think for policies it's important how to make more visible in a way the lifelong learning, vocational education, training, learning pathways, and for me that is really an important challenge.
Yeah.
Just to add a few things, actually I want to comment on the issue that was raised by our Brazilian colleague on actually the technological advantages that perhaps could be exploited by vocational education and training. I completely agree, but that means I believe that digitalization is actually more concrete and could be an advertiser for vocational education and training. But what we have to do is actually change the approach we have in this. That means by, let's say, adapting to the new needs and the new technological developments of our systems, of our curricula, and the way that we provide that technical vocational education and training qualifications to young people. Because still we can observe that in many countries, although they are suffering in VET, they still keep a traditional model that is not attractive and actually not invites new people to join and actually to follow this pathway. Something just also in relation, because I'm also Greek, we have two in the panel, in relation with countries with problems, because we can see, of course, that the problems that we are discussing have quite a different context according to the place we are discussing. So in a developed country or in a country that is not in a crisis, we can discuss under a different perspective all these things. In Greece, for example, which is in the middle of a crisis still after all these many years, I believe that the problem is also linked to the fact that the labor market is almost dead, I would say. So in reality, the labor market that should be one of the partners that would promote vocational education and training cannot correspond to the needs. And this creates one of the problems. And about less scientists, I don't know. I can wear the other hat, so the practitioners.
Yeah, maybe I would like to readdress that to Kelly, because what do you exactly mean by the statement, less scientists for TVET graduates?
This is connected to in the reality of Greece, I think, because we are a small country and we have more and more scientists every year, graduates from universities, in Greece and abroad also, because we have also the reality of people going abroad to study. And on the other hand, we need more practical jobs regarding to vocational training. So I think there is no need. I think that promoting vocational training, we can succeed to have an equality and a balance between what the labor market needs.
Could you just please shortly explain what your NGO exactly is doing? Because you told me about summer camps, for example. So who can attend these camps? Because it's on a rather informal level, right? So
yes, our organization, Hellenic Youth Participation, is an organization, a youth organization that promotes education and environment. We have European projects like Erasmus Plus, youth exchanges, training courses, and EVS, European Voluntary Service. Anyone can join that is motivated. The only limit is the age sometimes. On the other hand, during afternoons, we have a lifelong learning center in our bases in Athens, in our headquarters, and we promote also vocational training. We have some courses on restoration works of art, which I'm the vocational trainer, and we provide vocational training in graduates, university graduates, especially from the Department of Archaeology, History of Art, architects, mechanics, that they want to add in their CVs something connected, more practical than theoretical.
I think Loukas wanted to add a comment, and I just realized I forgot to bring my mobile up here, so I won't get the questions by Twitter, and you can answer. Yeah. I will quickly get my mobile.
Just a very short comment in relation exactly. I was talking about scientists. In reality, what we have observed, let's say, in countries in a crisis like in Greece, is the fact that we have already university graduates that return back to vocational education and training. So we have another flow, quite different from the traditional flow. So we have in many cases, due to unemployment, people that have already a bachelor's degree moving back lower down to the vet schools, because they know that they have more chances to find their job when they finish.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. You wanted to...
Yeah, just two quick remarks. First of all, if you say they have a bachelor degree and then they go lower down to TVET, this is the wording I would not prefer. Because, as you know, we would like to be on the same island. Maybe in the same direction is one remark of what you just said, that we offer for TVET participants the opportunity to go to university, but very few take this chance. Well, let's put it in two ways. First of all, this is a very important concerning attractiveness. It's a very important opportunity to have. But if nobody uses this opportunity, this is not automatically a bad thing. For example, in Germany, we have only 1% people at university without a high school degree, but that's okay, because to us it says that they have the opportunity, but first they don't need it because they are very good qualified in vocational education, and second thing, they don't want it because they are very good educated in vocational education and they earn what they need and they have the career opportunity that they want. So this is two sides of the same medal. First, you have the political or society-wide acceptance and knowledge that you have the possibility to do so, to move from one education path to the other. But if people don't do that, that's not a bad thing. That's okay for us. They need the opportunity. Thanks.
Yes, I just want to react to what you just said. University graduates is not going down. Going back to Tibet institutions to learn, because even in Nigeria we have that scenario. You have a lot of university graduates, and because of the high unemployment rate, most of them, lawyers, medical doctors, they still go back to Tibet at the informal level this time around to learn something. And you find out that at the end of the day, most of them are successful entrepreneurs and they are role models to a lot of youths. And then you have also Tibet graduates in my country, and they'll go back to university education because of the low perception. They just want to get the certificates. But getting the certificates, they realize that they still cannot get the job with the university certificate, and they will now have to go back to what they have learned during their Tibet education. So it's not, in my country, university graduates taking up, going for more Tibet training at the informal level, it's not going down. They see it as additional qualification for them that will make them relevant to the society, and at the end of the day, they end up employing even other youths. They are useful to themselves and to the society.
Thank you very much. Jefferson, what is the Brazilian system like? Because this is really, when it comes to Tibet, a little bit different from everything we've heard.
Yes, if you permit me, I'd like to share what are the challenges for Tibet in Brazil. But it's not possible to answer this question without understanding the evolution of our society. The most striking characteristic of Brazil are its regional diversity and social inequalities. Brazil is a continental country. It's so big and so different. We have difference between north and south, between east and west, between coast and countryside, great difference on climate, landscape, culture, and a lot of inequalities. Inequality in development of regions and cities, inequality in family income, and inequality in education levels. We are marked by our history of colonization. Slavery has left historical and profound social injustice in our society. For example, in 2012, 70% of all wealth produced in Brazil was concentrated among only 1% Brazilians. In 2014, only 6% of Brazilian adults declared to have an undergraduate degree. Half of Brazilian adults have not completed elementary school. In terms of education, unfortunately, we can say in Brazil, we have poor schools for poor people. The consequences are low levels of education for most workers and low income levels for most people. In my country, we usually say that we do not have development. We have economic growth, because the good things resulting from economic growth are for few people, and the bad things are shared by everyone. For example, good jobs are for few. pollution is for all. However, in the last 50 years, we have tried to change that reality. We have tried to change the concept of nation. Until then, nation was for a few privileged people. We have tried to build a new nation concept. A true nation needs to include everyone. To this end, the Brazilian government has realized in the last few years that TVET can help us and is an instrument to overcome many challenges. We have spread out our federal public TVET network across the country to reach poor people, especially young people and informal workers, in the countryside and in the medium and small towns. Currently, we have 644 campuses spread throughout the country with 800,000 enrollments. In addition, we have built a new type of TVET institution, the Federal Institute of Education, Science and Technology. These institutions allow young people to go through the whole technical and technological education pathway, from short vocational course, passing through technical programs and undergraduate programs to graduate programs, such as masters and doctorates in applied science at the same institution. It's a biggest difference. Throughout this technological education pathway, the students can participate in research and innovation projects, social and community innovation projects, international exchanges, cultural and sport activities, with the aim of preparing more than a competent professional, but aim at the development of a competent human being, a citizen of the world. In this type of institution, it will not be social economic condition that will limit one's education or qualification levels. The limit will be the desire to go beyond. From our point of view, the biggest issues for TVET in Brazil are access and permanence, more than attractiveness. We do not have enough vacancies for all candidates who wish to apply for our federal TVET network system. On average, there are 5 times more applicants than available positions. Some programs have more than 20 applicants per vacancy. Moreover, despite the fact the number of campuses of the federal TVET network has increased about 5 times in the last 50 years, another major challenge is how to support the poor students as they work through the program. Some of them live far from the schools and their families do not have enough money to pay for the cost of commuting, housing, and feeding. It's also challenging to make the TVET curriculum more suitable for workers. The low income of families compels a lot of young people to enter the world of work early. Many students in our schools working during the day and go to school at night. How can we adapt the curriculum and activity required by TVET programs to the reality? Is this challenge. For us, at the historical moment in Brazil, the biggest problem is not the attractivity of TVET, but how we can facilitate access and guarantee permanence for students to accomplish their desired goal to change their lives and our country for the better.
Okay, thank you. Loukas, Jens, so we have learned a little bit about the Brazilian system, and actually it sounded to me like in Tibet you can climb easily a vertical ladder. Like if you learn to be a car mechanic, you start lower and then there are like little bricks you can add, and then you have a higher education. So this is the so-called permeability. Your focus was on Europe. Is there a country in Europe that has like a similar system? Because when I think of Germany, the permeability is not so well established yet. Maybe Mr. Voss will contradict, but this is my opinion. But what is your findings about that?
I think a very interesting country in terms of VET as lifelong learning is actually Finland. because Finland has actually created a kind of adult learning system where adults in a way can continue taking or building on their vocational education training also in adult lives, and the numbers are very high. So I think that's one of the countries where is, first of all, the kind of the valuing of BET is quite high, and you see also people choose it, and as a part of the lifelong learning approach. This is a system which was started already in the 90s, but which has been growing. And I think these kind of cases are quite important, because it shows that learning is something which is taking place throughout life, but you also then have to facilitate this. The formal systems have to adapt to this kind of, so for example, in this particular case, recognition of prior learning is a very important part of it, so that you take into account your experiences for work, so that you don't repeat what you already know, but you build on it. So it's a kind of combination of recognizing what you learned in practice through work, and then adding up through formal education, and then giving, to say, or valuing that through certificates. So it's a very interesting case, I would say. But of course there are also other countries, but I think Finland is perhaps the one with the highest numbers of people actually, of adults going, where you can see this permeability and that progress.
So we have already heard about some elements which are important when it comes to attractiveness of Tibet. Like in your experience, for example, in Nigeria, what is the most important challenge when it comes to attractiveness? Is it permeability or mobility, something what Jefferson mentioned, or is it the youth unemployment rate in general? What would you say?
In Nigeria, we have so many problems associated with Tibet. The perception is very low from parents, the youth. Nobody wants to, his or her wants to attend any Tibet institution. And then we also have the HND, because the polytechnics, we offer the higher national diploma. And then you have the university awarding the bachelor's degree. So there's a dichotomy between the two in Nigeria. You find out that even in the public sector, the HND graduates from the polytechnic, the Tibet graduate, cannot get to the bar in the public service. They cannot get, there's a restriction for them. And that alone is a major challenge, because most of the youth, they see it as, it's one of the reasons why Tibet institution is not attractive in Nigeria, because majority of them, they just feel when they get a job in the public service, they cannot get to the top of the ladder, because the university graduates are at an advantage. So you see that is one of the reasons why so many youths in Nigeria will not want to go to Tibet institution. And also, we have, in terms of development, the university development is giving a lot of priority. We have a kind of agency in Nigeria that handles education tax fund in the country. And a lot of allocation is given to the university institutions. You have, in 2015, we had over 600 million Nigerian currency awarded to the university's institution to develop in terms of research, infrastructure, and all that. And then in the polytechnic, you have just less than 400 million given to the polytechnic. So you see, these are some of the challenges we have in Nigeria that causes the unattractiveness. And then paper qualification. A lot of people, a lot of youth and the society, the Nigerian society, prefers the paper qualification, not what you can offer, not what you can do. So a lot of youth, they just want to get a certificate. They just want to get the university certificate because the society is not laying emphasis on what the person can do. It's just about the certificates that you have. So those are the challenges.
Yeah, and now that you're working in a Tibet institution,
Yes.
I think what you did, for example, when you organized the first World Youth Skills Day, you told me in preparation that you involved the media, which would be one method to make it more known and make it more attractive. So exactly what did you do?
Yes, we organized the inaugural World Youth Skills Day, and because it was new and from a Tibet institution, nobody would want to pay attention to what we're doing. And we now thought of a strategy to invite one of the foremost movie stars in our country. And one of them is an alumnus of a Tibet institution. We invited her, and her presence at that event gave us the needed publicity for the World Youth Skills Day that year, because it was all over the news, it was on the social media, all the blogs, all the celebrity blogs, everyone was talking about World Youth Skills Day in Yaba College of Technology in Nigeria. So that was a strategy. And we all know that when it comes to celebrities, the media, the society, they want to know where are they going, what are they advocating for, what is it they are doing. So that was the strategy that we used, and it worked perfectly well. And since then, even the students, they're always looking forward to World Youth Skills Day every year in Yaba College of Technology because of that strategy we used. So I think it's a good one. If Tibet institutions can have Tibet ambassadors, people who will promote the activities of Tibet in that country. And we have a lot of organizations in Nigeria who have used that strategy also. For example, we have the National Open University of Nigeria. They also have the problem of low acceptance and poor perception with the public. And they decided to use that strategy. They were given the celebrity scholarship, and it was like an incentive for them to promote the Open University in Nigeria, and it worked for them because after they did that, a lot of students now began to get interest in seeking admission into the National Open University of Nigeria. So I believe strongly that if we have Tibet ambassadors, that will also help the problem of Tibet's unattractiveness. Well, in my country, it will do that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting approach. I think using the media, raising attention, and using marketing tools is always a good idea. Meaning, when it comes to an ambassador, it's working for UNICEF. Everybody, yes.
Yes.
So what do the scientists say to that, marketing as a tool to raise the attractiveness?
Scientists are not closely linked to mass media, but is it okay?
It's working.
It's fine, it's working. So, I already mentioned the example of Pele in my presentation. I need this idea of having vet ambassadors because Pele cannot be considered a scientist. But he's definitely a person that has more or less a vet background. So these cases are actually a way to promote the positive image. We have to admit that not only in Nigeria, but in many European countries, we have deep roots. That means economic, social, cultural factors that prevent actually the problems that we have to be solved. That means in relation to the image of Tibet. So you have in many countries the dream of the families to have, let's say, their sons and daughters moving to higher education and avoiding all types of blue-collar jobs, I could say. They want always to have a more, let's say, easy way in their life according to the way they see and they consider all this. Of course, this is, in our days, this is something completely wrong. And of course, this needs a mindset change, I could say. And of course, the role of mass media could be one of the crucial ones, because in reality, mass media actually are dominating, especially the young generations. I believe that by having campaigns that could promote this type of, let's say, ideas, would help definitely not only in Africa, but all over the world.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say, well, I don't want to speak about the kind of famous people, but in a way, how can you promote the kind of value of it? And I think one of the first things we should do is to stop speaking about higher and lower education, because that can also be higher education. You know, I think that is becoming clear. I mean, the way now, for example, European countries are using a kind of competence-based approach, learning outcomes, and you see that vocational education training is actually something you find at all levels of education and training. And that is a very important change in perception and mentality. I think the fact when you had the German qualification framework, you could see that the Meister was at the same level as the bachelor, but with a different set of skills in a way. That is a very important signal. You see the Swiss, for example, have now vocational professional qualifications from level 1 to level 8 of their qualification framework. And that is it's a very important signal that we are not speaking about higher education as university or kind of lower education training as vocational. We are speaking about vocationally oriented education training at all levels. And this change in perception is now slowly winning. But we really have to push that, because that, of course, changes also the perception of students, learners, and not least their parents. So I think that is important. We need to really push this change in perception.
Simone, I'd like, the question in Brazil today is how to attract the students for the secondary level, general secondary level. Because for most part of Brazilian is poor people. And the secondary level, general secondary level, prepare the students in Brazil for the university. But the university is not part of the reality of the majority of the people, okay? And the government have a strategy to use TVET to attractiveness the young poor people to finish the secondary schools, okay? And because especially for men, a practical knowledge is most attractiveness than the conception discussion. And it is a good practice in Brazil. Integrate TVET in the secondary level to attractive special the poor people. Then with this strategy we give a new meaning for the secondary level schools, okay? It was our strategy in Brazil.
So in Brazil maybe you won't need the marketing because the attractiveness lies in TVET itself already, but nevertheless I would like to get back to the World Youth Skills Day, which could be an opportunity to promote TVET. And as we do have 2 WorldSkills champions here today, I would use this opportunity now to introduce them again. It's Tobias Becher from Germany and Richard Wolfing from the Netherlands. And Tobias, you're an assistant restaurant manager at the K9 in Hamburg. This is a very posh restaurant, which was in the media recently because Ivanka Trump was dining there during the G20 summit with her entourage. Yes. I see some signs. Yes, but it's a kind of Japanese fusion restaurant, Tobias, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
Is it working?
It is working.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a Japanese, so it's a fusion kitchen. We do Japanese, South American cuisine, and yeah, you're more than invited, huh? Please help us.
He's really good trained already, as you see. And when we talked in preparation, he said he started his apprenticeship after he did his A-levels in Germany. And I asked him why. I think your friends, they went to university because when you do your A-levels in Germany, this is what you normally do, or a lot of people do. And he said, no, I wanted to learn a job from the start, not from the top. And I think that was really an interesting statement. So, could you please tell us about that?
There are a lot of points, because I was lucky, because also my childhood at home, nobody was pushing me and said you have to study, because my parents maybe also didn't study, they also just did it regular, and this is a tradition, what Mr. Voss said, a tradition in Germany, that you normally do school and then you do vocational training. But first of all, I wanted to say thank you, especially Mr. Voss, that you just make it clarify for everybody, and also what Jens said, there is no difference between a bachelor degree and a Meister or a vocational education training. It's just 2 different ways how to go on. And we need opportunities, also especially after the vocational trainee, to go on further and also able to work in the management. Just give the opportunity to them. And this is one necessary part which to enhance the attractiveness of vocational education trainee, make it equal and do not make a difference in between. Huh?
Yeah, and you already told me you have a lot of possibilities to make a good career. And then this is something I have experience with my friends, for example, because if you study and you enter the market like 10 years later maybe than the friends did who had a TVET apprentice, when we think 30 years in the future, retirement, who will earn more money? It's not me. It's my friends who had a TVET education, definitely. So if you think of that, are you with your friends who went on to university, is this a topic you talk about sometimes? Because money is a factor. So.
Not yet. Maybe later. Maybe later. But I think it's also a way of passion. And I just saw an interesting diagram. Because when you're just seeing your life from 0 to 80 years, you have the first 18 to 20 years school, and then after you're 65, in Germany it's 67, you're retiring. So the time before and after is beautiful. But the main time is our work. So we have over 40, maybe 50 years of working where this is the time we work, and I think it's necessary to do and to live the passion and to find the right job. And we talked about the percentages, what we said before. The guys are not really informed, also especially in school. Generally it's getting on, but when I remember my school time, I finished A-level in 2011. We didn't get any big informations over vocational education training. So there were a lot of universities, they hopped into the schools and said, hey, you can study this and this would be your opportunities after that. But nobody was pushing really hard vocational training. And I just mentioned to WorldSkills as well. So I was a really lucky guy to be part of that. And it's also a perfect way to make your passion real in a perfect way. And you have a great networking as well. So you compare yourself with other competitors from all over the world. You see different ways how to solve problems, how to make the competition, and and after that you have the opportunity now sitting here, with all your great guys, and to push something forward. So this is a great opportunity.
Thank you. And Richard, you're a welder. You are the youngest on the panel. You're 21 years old, and you won the Medal of Excellence in 2015 during WorldSkills. And you told me that when you were in school, you wanted to become a miller, which is really a stereotype of a Dutchman, if you think about it. But then you switched to welding because you like working with your hands and with metals. And you told me because you're coming from a family with a working background, your brother's a carpenter, right? And your father's working in a factory. Your parents never pushed you. They just said, do what you like. And I think this is actually what parents really should do. And yeah, maybe you could tell us how it was for you, like doing really, a welder. Is this like a classic craft job?
Well, thank you for the introduction. It was like a stressful, education for me because I liked what I did.
Yeah, I can give you a hand mic because somehow it's not working properly.
Thank you. It was a stress-free education for me, I think, because I liked what I did. And I had 3 days of working and 2 days of school. And on those 2 days of school, I had 1 day of working in a workshop.
A dual system.
Yeah, dual system, and that actually was perfect for me. It fitted with everything I wanted to do. And the company where I used to work there was a man who guided all the students. It was a big factory actually, so we had multiple students there. And he didn't push me, but he guided me away in a way I can't explain, but he guided me away to competition. So he gave me up for a competition of the pre-trial for WorldSkills, and that man made the man who I am now, actually. So yeah, it was not the pushing of my parents, which is amazing, and then starting working in a factory, and there the people who help you there, yeah, they make you a really good craftsman. So I don't think it's only yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's not just the school that is important, but also the companies where you work, where you do your dual system. I think that's, yeah, just the mentor is really amazing. That should be the man who is guiding you the way.
Yeah, that's true. A good teacher, a good mentor is always really important. And also, as Tobias mentioned, the soft skills have to be somehow part of a curriculum. And this is what I would like to address. My next question to the man sitting next to you. This is Dennis Lizano from Costa Rica, and he's a trained computer engineer, and he's now project management director of Possible. That's a big international digital marketing enterprise, and he really knows what challenges TVET students have to face, because he himself, he went all the way up from being an apprentice to be a boss, and now, Dennis, you're actually hiring people. And I would like to ask you, what are you looking for in an employee?
Well, yeah, it is an interesting question. The thing is that, of course, when you're looking for a person to fill out a position, you're looking for someone who has the skills to do the things that they have to do. Like, I don't know, if it is a software developer, they should know the languages they will be developing with. If it is a creative person, they have to show like a portfolio with all their knowledge represented in the work that they have done. If it is a project manager, which is mostly the people that I hire, it's a little bit difficult because there isn't like things that you can show. Of course, there is the experience, but what we focus most on, is the soft skills. It's basically like there's a lot of things that you can know from people based on their soft skills. And it's a little bit tricky to interview someone based on that. And I will guess, because I wouldn't be the person, but I will guess it's a challenge for education to improve those soft skills. We're talking about, I don't know, organizational skills, like how you're able to organize yourself when you have a lot of work to do, or from different streams of work. We're also talking about teamwork, or how easily you can change depending on the situation, how you can react to changes, how you manage pressure, of course, and there are things related to risks as well. All those soft skills are what, for us, make a great professional. It's not just what they know, it's how they use it.
You went to a technical high school yourself for ICT. Were soft skills part of the curriculum?
No, they weren't.
They weren't. The researchers, are soft skills part of the curriculum?
Actually, it's good that this came up, because we actually have another project. What we did was we took 10 vocational qualifications and looked at the standards or the curricula and opinion, and then we compared it first in 10 European countries, and then we went on in cooperation with UNESCO to compare it in 26 countries all over the world. And one of the main findings is that countries balance the more technical specific and the kind of soft skill, transversal skills very differently. And this is, I think, a very interesting finding, to see the difference between countries in terms of how they actually approach this question, because you need to balance the more technical specific, for example in ICT, with teamwork, with communication, with problem solving, very important issues. And the question is, how do you balance this? How do you approach this? And I think there's too little discussion. We discuss institutions, but we don't discuss sufficiently this kind of balance between the different kinds of skills. And we also, I think, need to discuss that in an international context, because I mean, ICT skills are not something kind of locked into a national context. It's something working at an international level, and that applies to more and more vocational skills. So I think we need to discuss this kind of content, the profiles of vocational skills. And I think WorldSkills actually is doing quite a good job in this, but I think we need to further extend this, because this is important for attractiveness and also the relevance of vocational skills.
just to add that I think with these three short interventions, we managed to cover again, or to bring the parts of the puzzle together. That means we started from the different elements that we need. That means we have the role of the family, of the society, it should be supportive. Then we have the necessity to have the right skills. Then we have the necessity to have the right information that will finally lead to finding a job, which is what we really want. And it was very wise, the first saying, because I'm still reflecting on it. You are absolutely correct. The first 20 years, we actually don't know what we like and what we want to do in our life. And after the age of 65, I'm afraid we cannot do what we want and what we really like to do in our life. So in reality, we have a dead end. We have to find these 45 years, the working life period, and have a profession we really like, a job we really like, and that will give us the possibility to have a decent level of life in general.
Somebody on the panel who wants to add something regarding social stigma, soft skills? Yes,
I would like to reflect exactly on this, because as you said, you have to think about the parents, the society, you have to make contact to the labor market and to maybe the wage system, to adopt everything. And so it's not just an education system where you have to think about curricula or how to involve soft skills, which we do basically automatically in Germany because people are trained in companies and they learn it basically by their side automatically. Well, what I would say is, what I would like to say is, what in my opinion is very important, if not the most important thing to vocational education system, to TVET system, is what we call in Germany the principle of consensus. You need the employers association and the trade unions and the ministries and the schools and so on and so on. What we do is when we develop curricula, we sit together with, as I said, trade unions, associations and the ministries. When we talk about vocational policy in Germany, we have this sort of group in the BIBB, which is kind of next door, where we sit all together and discuss things. So it's an eye-to-eye level with all relevant institutions in Germany. It's not the system of the ministries, it's not the system of the associations, the crafts, for example. It's not the system of the trade union, it's our system all together, and we have to work, as I said, in consensus with this system. And then we will manage to adapt it to the labor market, to the wage system, to the education system, and so on.
Kelly, may you add something to that?
Yes, I would like to add, actually I was amazed about your statement that you wanted to learn the job from the bottom, and that reminds me how important it is when you create your own job, your own enterprise, and to have also knowledge of all the jobs that are included in your enterprise, and how important it is also, apart from theoretical, to have some practical, and vocational training is now here to provide this.
Thank you. Just in case that we are focusing maybe a little bit too much on a European perspective or Latin American, African with African perspective, I would like to ask Mr. Al-Alfi from the government of Egypt. He's Director of Programs at the Industrial Training Council, ICT, and maybe you could give us a quick overview on the Arab region. What is the problem of Tibet's attractiveness in Arabian countries?
It's the same, I think it's the same as all of the world. We have a problem in the perception for looking for the Tibet. Although the attractiveness of the Tibet nowadays in Egypt is a back door for the higher education. So a lot of people, we don't have a problem with attractiveness. They have a back door who go into the higher education and have the university degree. Our role in Egypt, mainly the Industrial Training Council, is working closely with the Ministry of Education, as we have seen a bigger gap of the skills in the labor market, especially in the Tibet sector, or the graduates from the schools, the Tibet schools, and they are about every year 750,000 students coming out for the labor market with no skills, or with skills that's not matching what the industry wants. So what we have done groups with the industry to find these gaps, doing curriculums or curricula matching what they want, involving them with us in doing this curricula, and also when we are for the engagement in the work, we have the guidance also, and they are involved also. And another player which is important is the parents, and they are involved when they are going to the schools, see the schools, how they are, the training centers, how they are attractive, and their children will have work after they have finished this training courses. This is for the short term. For the long term, we are trying to find the ways of embedding the skills, the new skills, the soft skills, which is the ICT, for example, entrepreneur skills in the school, from the preparatory schools, before the secondary technical schools. This is an overview quickly about this. Also, we have done something in the social media by doing campaigns, by using another important player in our governorates with the NGOs. NGOs in Egypt is very important for us because they are involved in every governorate. We have 27 governorates, and they know what the people want there. That's in the context of what is happening now in Egypt. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And again, a hint to use the social media in this case. Thank you. Then we have, for the Asian perspective, because Asia, of course, this is a huge continent as well. We have Dr. Young-Sang Kim from Seoul in South Korea. Welcome to the panel. And he's a senior fellow of BIBB. This is the Korea Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training. And he's also Secretary General of the East Asian Tibet Network. And you told me as well that, especially in East Asia, the social stigmata is a problem, right?
Yes, actually, a lot of ideas popped up in my mind. But I want to focus on two topics in this discussion, and then I will make a presentation in the afternoon, because I will reveal more ideas. I'd like to focus on the quality and intensity of Tibet. Because the school, we need to measure what is the real learning gain in Tibet Institute. Because in general higher education, general high school and the vocational Tibet high school, what kind of the learning takes place? Yeah, when I visited the Tibet Institute in Germany, Australia, Switzerland, and I was surprised because of the quality of education, training, and the intensity and investment, facility, equipment, and the quality of the teachers. I think to facilitate or to operate the Tibet Institute in the secondary level properly, they need 7 times bigger resource compared to the general education. General education, they need just rooms, classroom, and textbook, and good teachers. That's it. But Tibet Institute need a lot more workshop, equipment, and all the arrangement they need. But usually, even actually, I'm working with many Asian developing countries. When I visited the Tibet Institute, it's outdated equipment, outdated skill. And a long time ago they constructed, no innovations. And then they say, oh, the quality and then the stigma on Tibet is a serious problem. Because I would like to recommend that. Please enhance the quality and intensity, really to make the Tibet Institute as a learning place. That is, if learning takes place in the Tibet place, after the graduation, they can choose their careers from Tibet to higher education easily. But if real learning gain does not take place in Tibet, it's very difficult to change their careers. If they move to the higher education, they cannot catch up. Because I think we need to check out not just the social conception. Social conception is socially constructed, accumulated long time. Because I will focus on that stigma things. But when I look at the developing countries, Tibet Institute, we should look at real quality of learning, education and training, and their intensity, and investment resource allocations. Otherwise, it's very difficult to. And second idea is that when I look at, actually I'm in charge of the Tibet policy development in Korea, and then we try to replicate the German system, dual system and qualification framework. We make a series of failures. We try to introduce many things, but nothing happened. Because we do not understand the evolution.
Mr. Voss.
You should have asked us.
Yeah. Maybe you can work on that later on.
Yeah, that's kind of, because we need to think about our stage of development, maturity. Germans started their kind of development 700 years ago. They tried to measure their skill, and they tried to address the skill mismatch in long time ago. And Korea started that kind of things only 20 years ago.
I really hope for you that it won't take you.
Yeah, that's we need to catch up 700 years to accumulate. Actually, we can borrow the technical skills and knowledge without any kind of this kind of consideration. But social construction, socially constructed institution, it's almost impossible to replicate in other places.
There were so many points you were focusing on, that ICT or equipment getting outdated very fast, and I would like to take the opportunity to introduce you to our last but not least discussant, who is Professor Lazarov. He's a professor of education with orientation to that in Sweden. But he's born in Cuba and he went up north, which I really can't understand. But he, for example, he has another incentive. He says, he strongly argues that we should include Tibet in the compulsory education. Mr. Herrera, what do you mean by that? Maybe have mics are better.
Well, first of all, thanks for invitation. I'm very glad to listen to the presentation we have today. So there's a lot of inspiration from what we have been listening. I mean, saying including Tibet in compulsory, in so-called compulsory education maybe sounds very strong word. What I mean is that really we are trying to build what you say gigant with a very clay ground, actually. I said very often when we discuss about the problems in Tibet, and in Sweden has been an issue of social debate, political debate, strongly in the last elections, and I said we are always wondering what is happening there, what is the problems that we have, dropouts and so on. But I said let's start a discussion far earlier. We're still going on with the dichotomy between theory and practice, and that's known. But I said it's not only about that, it's about how we are dealing with the perception of practical knowledge and theoretical knowledge, not only about this theory, like one of the colleagues says before, Einstein's already mentioned. Let's move on forward and say, how are we dealing with this perception? If the children are moving on in the compulsory school with theoretical knowledge is relevant because it leads you there, and practical knowledge, well, if you cannot do anything else, you can work with your hands, then we're on the wrong track. And then there has been steps taken forward. We have practical subjects in the compulsory school, but it has been there as a decoration. And the discussion we have had in school, in particular, I did my PhD and worked in Finland for several years as well. And there the discussion was, let's try to get it closer to the working life, to the vocational training. There are some old ideas from before about the polytechnic education. And I mean, this polytechnic education has been very controversial applied, because this simple principle that polytechnical education is about linking the school with industrial development, as it was Krupskaya and all these old names. I said, well, we are in new times and we need new solutions. Well, we need to revisit what is the position of practical subjects in the compulsory school and start earlier than we are doing now. And the discussion for us in my research group is, let's try to investigate what happened in level of motivation, how are we working in vocational oriented subjects in compulsory education. So I think there we have a very strong work to do. And the other issue is also that we are insisting is also has to do with the view on vocational education and training, and how we are highlighting cases of success in vocational education and training. I mean, it's great to see how in the last few years media has been more and more in attention, and we are really proactive nowadays with our going out with all the ways, but still we have a long way to go in terms of advertising and marketing successful cases in that. I think some of you mentioned, and we used to say in Sweden, people fixing our cars are making sometimes more money than a professor at the university. But no one mentions that, you know. It's, well, you fix the car and this is it. So I think that is one of the issues. I think, back to your remark, compulsory education, if you could call it this way, is a very strong element there that we need to revisit, and we need to create links with policymakers, with what happens there, in order to develop strategies that would help us to really motivate for BIBB.
This is something I would like to readdress to you. Are there countries in the EU or maybe in the world you know about who already have like TVET kind of education in their compulsory education schools? Mr. Ryan from the BIBB.
Well, I may add,
yes.
Maybe you can hear me. I may add an experience which is not very taken very much seriously, unfortunately, in the United States. The high schools, many high schools in the United States integrated ordinary vocational schools in the compulsory track. Although the reality is, as you might assume, they're not very well accepted. But anyway, it's there. It's an interesting experience. We should take a look at it.
Thank you. Yes, Jens.
Just about compulsory education. There was a very interesting book coming out in Denmark a couple of years ago, which was actually analyzes what has happened to compulsory education and the kind of practical skills. And what he pointed to was called the reduction of what traditionally had been quite a strong element of compulsory education, for example, woodworking, handicrafts, and these kind of things, which gradually have disappeared out. And of course, this is quite serious in a way that you move towards a kind of preparatory school for kind of general education, which is then preparing you for university. So you are creating a kind of pathway which is focused on general kind of theoretical basis, and where you lose out. So I think in my introduction I said that when we are looking at VET, we shouldn't look at it as a silo. We need to look at the whole education training system and the interaction between them. And then I think compulsory education is actually a very important kind of first step, and there is hardly any discussion on that. So I'm happy that it was brought up by our colleague here from Stockholm.
Briefly, because many issues were raised, so I wanted actually to comment on the Korean colleague's position. I completely agree about the issue you raised about infrastructure, but in reality, all this issue of quality, it leads to the need, to the necessity to have a funding for VET. In reality, this means you need a political support, a political focus on VET, and in reality, this finally leads again to the general discussion about the political, social, economic context of each country. What I also wanted to say is about also the failures you face trying to, let's say, imitate or just convey one system directly to your country. No, it's of course you should not. It is not possible to just bring the German system to Korea.
Every country try.
Yeah. But you should take into account the context. So it is very important to adjust the system according to your needs. And of course, don't look back to the past, because you said about the 700 years compared to Germany. I am also Greek. 2,500 years ago we had discovered everything, but I think we are not leading in all sectors right now. So we have others that can catch up easily, and I think Korea is one of the cases that moves fast.
Yeah.
Also something else about Sweden. Also, I wanted to say about, I really like the way that you presented this, and actually I see that you have a tendency to move to a simpler approach, a simple approach. That means to simplify what we consider quite complicated issues in other countries and in many cases in the research work. And that's why I wanted to mention again Einstein. One of the famous quotes by Einstein that is that we have to make things simple, but not simpler. So this is the case.
Yeah, just an addition. Yeah, well, it's nice this with simple without being simplistic.
Yes.
But there is also a core issue here that, at least from our research perspective, is very important. And we used to talk about how big is the E in Tibet, education. And we are talking about a society where we're talking about multi-skilling, technological literacy. And very often we are really dealing with training more than what we should do with the E, with the education. Preparing individuals that will be able, they will now go, we are not in the times of Chaplin with modern times and doing the same thing. So we have times in which you will transfer, you have to adapt to a changing working labor market and so on. So the size of the E is very important. All the core issue for us is also how we are dealing, and luckily our research team was also dealing with teacher training for vocational education training. And that's a heavy discussion in our environment. Very often it's enough that you are a good engineer and you are good in your specialty. And we said no, because we are talking about education. If we don't have well-trained teachers in vocational education, we keep on replicating the training part without strengthening the education. So what kind of pedagogical education and training we have there? So that for us is an important part, and it's a missing link. I mean, if someone doesn't have psychological or educational component to motivate the students, and is insisting, here are the instructions, do that. So I think for us, teacher training for vocational education is one of the areas that needs to be addressed. We are doing our little grain of sand research projects and so on that, but I think I would like to see more international focus on what is happening there in relation to teacher training for vocational education training.
Yeah, that's exactly what our Tibet graduates already everybody said, no? Like the teacher is really important. And when I think being in high school, the teachers, I still can remember that were always teachers who were very motivated, who did something different and something, and then they influenced me. This is so, when it comes to teacher methods, this is very important. But I think Mr. Ryan from BIBB, you wanted to answer directly to that.
Yes, Professor Vera, I'm very happy that you raised that point, and I would link it to one of the major conclusions of your project, changing nature and role of that in Europe. And one conclusion was, we have to look at education and training system as a whole. Education and training as a whole. You raised one, is how can we integrate it in compulsory? But what I'm heading for is, when you said, Jens, and it's right, we should think about appropriate solutions developments, how we integrate what we now call vocational learning in this education and training system on the whole. And I think everybody would agree when I assume this is what we call now vocational learning. on the higher level, even up to a PhD program level or master, would be something different. It had to be transformed. And I think we have to think more about what are the intersections between in terms of conceptual approaches. I think the level is very important, pedagogical, epistemological. Here's the driver, I think. Not the systemic level is the driver. Here is the driver. And we should come and encourage people to come from general education, higher education, okay, what is still called TVET, to talk about these conceptualizations, the right pedagogical processes. Competence is the issue, the promotion of competence. And here I have a big problem. This gathering is called How to Enhance TVET, but I think we are discussing on sand. The earth is moving, huh? When we think of education and training as a whole, so can we go on again and again and again, how can we enhance TVET when we know the separation is blurring? That's a really rhetorical question, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I think I would use this as a cut right now and open the discussion to the audience. And first I would like to start with a question for you all of you, because most people who are sitting here have an academic background. So is there anybody with an academic background who has a TVET background himself as well? There's one body shyly rising. You have to. Yes, I know, of course, Calleja has it. Which is it? For example, would somebody like to satisfy it? Okay, please.
Well, I started as an ICT programming, computer science basically, and then I moved into communications. So I have my bachelor's in communications, and I'm currently enrolled in master's as well in media.
Thank you. And who has sent his children to a TVET school?
I tried.
Of course. Everything else would be.
I tried it.
You did too. Oh, whose children are so small and who would think about sending them to a TVET school? Oh boy, yeah. So if you look at this little, not official survey, we have the answers. So, but when it comes to answers and questions, I hope somebody has a question in the audience. Are there? Ah, there is somebody. Yes? Please use the mic next to you. Yes?
It's really about the competitions aspect related to the marketing discussion earlier. How do we promote competitions more? Is that the right way to appeal to youth and in essence trying to increase the attractiveness of TVET? And I've got the two winners in front of me and they're a good example, but is this something that can be upscaled and done more?
Who would you like to address your question to? Is there somebody in particular?
Yeah, I can
right. Okay. Okay.
If that's okay with you.
Of course, yes, go on.
Because it's an interesting question you raised, because we in the Netherlands, we've been working on this for a number of years, and it appeared that competitions not always is a strong instrument to all students. It's only appealing to some of the students who are, triggered by the competition effect or element. So still we wanted to use Richard and Tobias in Germany as role models in our campaigns in the Netherlands. So what we did is we set up a social media platform in which young students, the winners, the champions, still play a role, but more appealing to a broader VET society group, young people. And in short, it has an enormous impact. It attracts hundreds of thousands of young people to watch short movies on all kinds of aspects of VET, but then in a way which is more appealing to the receiver of the message. So not as sending information, there's a lot of information sent by VET institutes and what have you more in a sort of educational way. But most of the time, on the receiver end, the young people, they don't want to see it in that way, they want to see it in a way which is more appealing to them. So I think we found that link, that key, and it attracts around 700,000 viewers on a regular basis. So I don't know if that answers your question, but But competitions, for a big part, is a solution, but not for all, that's for sure.
Simone, I would like to return to the point that our colleague from Sweden talked. The importance to articulate the Tibet with the education in general, because in Brazil we had in 2012 we have increased our economy increased a lot, and we offer a lot of vacancies in the Tibet system. But we have a problem because some part of the people don't have the basic concepts of the elementary schools. And it's so important in the politicians, you increase the skills, but it's so important to increase the basic concept, because the technology is so complex today, and if you don't understand some basic elements in the general, like physics, mathematics, it's difficult to be part of a good training. And it's so important the increase the level of the scholarization of the people to have a powerful Tibet system too. It's our impression.
Yeah, thank you. You can put it there. There another question? Yes, please.
Yes, I have a question to Jefferson from Brazil. I was very impressed about what you presented about the VET system in Brazil, and that you don't have any problems of attractiveness at all. And all this sounds to me like sort of success story. And I want to know a little bit more about the role of the companies in your system, because I'm here for the BDA, the German Employers Association, and that's why this point would be very interesting for me.
Okay, thank you for the question. We have a relation with the companies, it's important, but we are part of the public segment of the education, and our presence in the part of the Brazil that don't have a big industry and a chain of industry, okay? And part of our Tibet system is in capital with the big companies, and the relationship is very near. But in the countryside of Brazil, we have another challenges, the relationship with the agriculture field, and we try to improve and strengthen the social relationship around our institution, and we try to give opportunity for the person in the scholarization and in the entrepreneurship, to try to, because a lot of people have informal workers, okay, and in outside of Brazil we don't have a powerful industry, and we try to dialogue with the other actors, like social actors, and we try to improve the culture, the social skills, okay, and it's different because Brazil is so big and so different in all, okay, and in the capital, and when we have a big industry or medium industry, we have a so near relationship.
Yeah, I have one question to all of you, because this is a golden opportunity for us. You are from different region and researchers are here. How many of you think we need to rebrand Tibet town? I'm just rebranding the Tibet town. Do you think this term is going with the changing nature of it? Is it consonant? I'm giving you some example. America, North America, Canada, USA don't use PET, neither use this. They have a different nomenclature. I'm not going to the detail. Africa has started as a African Union, different name, they have started using that. Even I went to Hong Kong a few days ago, where you are supposed to go, I think. There they use BPET, not VET, professional and others. I was only like to know from you, how many of you think that it is not only by name, but this signifies something to the youth. We need to rethink about the nomenclature regarding the attractiveness. Second, I'd like to, not the question, a remark. I think the question has been raised by Sweden, very good. There is a disjoint set between E and T. E is the education, T is the training. And historically, that was the age I grew up. I know when vocational skill was taught in India at that time, you don't need mathematics. Why you need mathematics? This is a skill directly you can do. That is vocational. What is education? You have to go to classroom, algebra, mathematics, science you have to do, because you have to invent something. These are the people only have skill, you know, they put up something, they do not need education. Because historically, E and T is a disjoint set. Now, entire thing has been changed. There is a correlation between E and T, and it is on continuum. Why I am telling you? In India, there was a car called Hind, an own car, Ambassadors. When it is got defected in the road, you go to a garage. Even not in India, I have seen in Arab and many other countries. Who comes to repair that? A dirty, you know, with a hammer, dun 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 dun. They repair it. And you ask him, do you have any education? No, no, no. This I learned from father in the garage, day after day. Wonderful skill they have. But now they are losing job because all car is microprocessor based. And there you need to insert the microprocessor and you need diagnostic skill. Here comes my argument. Can you identify any occupation where E is not necessary? Why is the monopoly of university? Why it is not seen as a lifelong continuum? Without science and engineering, education and math, you will be unfit for the future, any kind of occupation. That is the reality, and that demands a new way to look. Artificially, we have divided mental labor and physical labor. And that is historic in some cultural sense. The world has totally changed. That's my reaction on this.
Absolutely, and then there are so many things involved, like lifelong learning is one perspective, of course. If I imagine even in an industrialized country like Germany, a 60-year-old car mechanic who should be a car mechatronic by now, and then he has to deal with electro cars. So yeah, I can imagine that they will maybe hand that over to the apprentice, maybe. Then, is there anybody who wants? Yeah, you ask everybody who wants to. Yes, please, yeah.
I quite agree with Shyamal. I think the name TVET needs to be rebranded, because in Nigeria, for example, TVET is associated with traditional, old, you know, and that's why nobody wants to be associated with it. And again, TVET is one of the earliest education systems in Nigeria. So people have that at the back of their minds when you talk about TVET. The youth see it it's not modern. I mean, they don't see TVET as being modern. So I think if we rebrand that name TVET, it will be more attractive to the youth. I mean, those are the target groups.
And how to do that? That's the challenge. Changing the culture of the people, is that possible, even in a country where we have so much history?
Maybe two short remarks. First of all, I think I know what you mean with the name, but to be honest, if you ask some people on German streets if they know what TVET is, everybody would say, well, to be honest, no. So every country has its own name But what it is important, and we do that in Germany right now, is to reflect on this higher, the word higher. When we talk about Germany, about higher education, we intend, we more and more intend, to mean both. Higher vocational education and higher academic education on the same level. We reflected to that earlier. And we rebranded, for example, our Meister qualification and all this, we rebranded it in the German language like it's higher vocational education, not meaning that the other thing is lower education, but that we are on the same level as academics. And this is, I think, a task for every country itself.
Just quickly, higher academic, higher vocational.
No. Only higher education, meaning both.
Yes.
We're not separating anymore.
Some country has come professional, the word they are using, to cover the both. There is no higher and lower, because professional education like doctor, lawyer, you don't need, they are treated as basically their vocation. Doctor, lawyer, originally is a vocation, but they have a different social prestige. When we put this vocational education, immediately we have a lower image, a person will come, doesn't know any education.
Absolutely.
That's the problem.
Yes. Even
I agree.
a journalist, like an editor, is actually a vocational training, but it's after university. Yes, so it was even longer for me. But Mr. Rein, your research focus is on the intersection between that and so-called higher education, academic education.
And what I'm struggling is since a long time about the terms. The terms and the context, how it is used, where it is used, and so on. And they see it, and they see strong interest. See, for example, now there's a strong group who says, okay, we need a group of vocational and professional education, although everybody knows that the term professional comes from the university for lawyers, for physicians, and so on. So I think there's really a need to clarify, to come to new redefinitions of all these terms. But I would really reject just to, and what you say, dear colleague, I say Dr. Voss, and I tell you why I emphasize this. You and I, we come from the university, from the academia. And we did our research, otherwise we wouldn't get this degree. And by good reasons, academia has in all over the world a strong role. So we should avoid, long story short, by all means, that's my argument, just to put in, to regard what was higher education at that time, just as a provider for the labor market and other workforce on higher levels. There is a clear distinction in terms of academia because it's linked to research, otherwise our modern society would not survive. And this has to be differentiated. So long story short, you're right, we have the discussion in Germany about Berufsbildung, occupational education and training, but we differentiate between academic and not academic, just say Betrieblich. I'm not very happy about this. Company-based, I'm not very happy about it, because there's still a separation then between education and training. But these are examples just out of the discussion in Germany, and as I see also in Europe, that we have to clarify the terms and to redefine it, otherwise we cannot communicate.
Yes, but then again we will put that back to an international level, and I think Professor Herrera, you wanted to add something. I did not forget you.
Yeah, no, it was just a short remark. Moving away, I don't know if someone would like to add on the topic.
James?
Sorry, yeah. No, because I'm just moving shortly to another area. I mean, I have been looking, we have been discussing within our research community in Sweden about the WorldSkills and the very important role that it has in making visible. And then the question we are asking and trying to start initiating our own small-scale research is about what about young inventors at early stage? And how good could it be to do that and list that one more? Now there is a tendency, we have managed to get in touch with people like you in the media and say, will you please follow when they have these children's inventions and so on, because that would be excellent in programs and so on. And we have been, listening to some positive response. But that for me, still as a researcher, is curiosity. What happens at international level? Is anyone caring for that? Is someone potentiating these young inventors competitions, presentations? Is there anything there? Would it be convenient, and that would be perhaps for another part of the agenda, to internationally study what happens in different contexts? I'm just talking about these issues because it's not only about subject in compulsory school, it's about having a more holistic approach to different dimensions that could help motivating for vocational education training.
That's a very good point. And when it comes to a national level, I know, for example, for Germany, there are a lot of like competitions even with children inventing something, their programs. But I have to be the master of disaster now. There were some more questions. James, you wanted to say something?
A short comment to complement what Shyamal was saying regarding branding or rebranding. Going back to my previous life, this was a topic which in my country, which is made up of 421,000 people, and you would expect the decisions, which is Malta, and therefore you expect decisions to come quickly. We had a long debate about rebranding VET because VET was never attractive to anyone in my country. It didn't lead to anywhere, and no matter how much we discussed in public and used as media, etc., it really didn't sink. Why? Because it's useless rebranding a product and the product remains the same. So if you go from VET to TVET or whatever, or VPET, etc., and then the people buy the product and they see still dead ends, qualifications which don't lead, etc. So the story, we reversed the story, and we decided after 2 years of discussion, because in my country, if it's education or politics, you have 421,000 experts. And therefore everyone comes into the debate, of course. What we decided to do was to introduce a bachelor's degree in vocational education and training. That's point number one. Point number two was to negotiate with our own university that whether you have a bachelor's degree at university or a bachelor's degree from vocational education training, they will enjoy the same parity of esteem, and we got the employers to agree. And they did. Easily, of course, because they had an interest in that. So, all of a sudden parents realized, with a vocational education training bachelor's degree, their children will have the same parity of esteem. They have a bachelor's degree. They can carry a BA, honors, etc., etc. Secondly, employability was increased. Thirdly, they can get quality jobs, like all other bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. And fourthly, they are well-paid jobs. And that's the rebranding of vocational education training in my country. And it made a huge change in the perception of people. University today is 11,000 students. Vocational education training institution is coming close to 9,000 students. So, this is from a country that really never believed that vocational education training has any value. You put value in it, and then it becomes attractive.
Yeah, and it is possible. And when I understood you right, then this is like the principle of consensus Mr. Voss said was implemented successfully. But there are really a lot of questions. It was the lady in the last row, I think first. There was a question behind there, and Hamid after that. Yes, oh yeah, the lady over there, yes, please.
Hi, thank you for a wonderful discussion. I have a question which is in relation to 2 points that were raised. One was that most of these CEDEFOP graduates become really good entrepreneurs, and you're also trying to collaborate with universities in order to educate these students as well. I was wondering if nowadays university graduates, they turn towards entrepreneurship. And one of the ways they network with one another is through co-working spaces, which is on a huge rise all across the globe. And that's one platform where they lack vocational training. So once they graduate from universities, one of the challenges these graduates face is that they're not able to really enter the market and practice their skill sets. And through these co-working spaces, they network and build on those skill sets. And I was wondering if DeWet could actually, rather than only universities or through their own training centers, There are other platforms like incubators and co-working spaces which offer training programs. And vocational training is something that these entrepreneurs are looking forward to because they already have university degrees from very good universities. But the challenge for them is networking and also making use of their university degrees in the real marketplace. And Dept could, I was just wondering if that's another platform through which Dept could offer vocational training to future entrepreneurs who want to enter the labor market and create new jobs if they face this challenge.
Is there something you would like to address this question directly to?
No, it's a
otherwise I would like
question.
to open it to the panel. Co-working spaces, for example, as a platform for a uni. Maybe Kelly, because yes, this is...
Yes. Yeah, all the mics gone.
Here is one.
Okay.
It's okay, yeah. Thank you for your question. Actually, yes, that happened in Greece also, that there is a huge increase of incubators, which actually offer vocational training to university graduates in order to make their own entrepreneurs and company and provide them with entrepreneurial skills. What exactly do you like to ask? If this is also part of the, this can be a part of the Tibet?
Because it was mentioned how I think you planned it.
Maybe you can try to use the mic.
That Tibet could be, the attractiveness of Tibet has to be increased and how it needs to be rebranded in certain ways. And I was just wondering if that's one way of reaching out to more people with vocational training programs. Because I mean, what I understood was when you're going to collaborate with universities, that would be a specialized program for whatever you're interested in getting training for. With co-working spaces, you could join different vocational training programs and then train yourself because you already have your educational degrees with you. But now you're getting vocational training because in different areas, maybe as a marketeer, or maybe a technical background, technical education. So you could combine, more than one program together.
Yes, I have an example of a Greek university that already has in its own building an incubator. So directly the students, before they graduate, they take this training inside the university. I totally agree with you, and it's high demand that the university can add some courses more vocational and help the graduates. And that's what we do in our organization actually. We provide these vocational trainings to students and to graduates also. But it would be better if this training can be part during the study, and when you graduate, to be more ready to get in the labor market.
Jens, you wanted to add something to the question?
Just asked more towards the final, because what I noticed, the discussion is turning. Normally we discuss BIBB as a kind of set of institution, a system in a way. What the discussion is more and more focusing is actually on BIBB as a particular way of learning, a particular focus on knowledge skills. I mean, that is what the kind of way of supporting entrepreneurship and so on. So in a way, it illustrates my points from the introduction that if you're going to understand BIBB, if you're going to promote it, you can not only look at the institutions as they are today, you have to look at how do we promote vocational learning, practice-based learning, all these kind of qualities of BIBB into a wider set, the whole education training system. And how do you balance that towards what Volker said? I mean, there needs to be a balance there between the theoretical academic focus, but how do you combine this and create a kind of symbiosis between these two different forms of learning? I think that is the discussion here. And as regards to rebranding, I would be very careful about that, because the world, not all the world speak English. If you look at the national languages, there are very different ways of actually the term vocationally oriented education very different. But I think the responsibilities, of course, on institutions like CEDEFOP and UNEVOC, UNESCO, in what kind of terms do we use? Is technical vocational education training right? Is technical providing a kind of a link to a kind of tradition of the past? or I think these international organizations need to reflect on how do we kind of brand this particular way of education.
Thank you. As time is ticking, I would like to take two last questions. First with Hamid, I did not forget you. Do you still have your question, or was it already answered?
Yeah, I prefer to bring it up.
Yes. Could you use the mic next to you if it is working? Otherwise, I can give you a hand mic.
Yeah. You have me?
Yes.
Okay. Hamid Tabayeri from Shahid Graduate Teacher Training University, Iran. First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for the privilege of addressing this workshop, to be among so many professionals and technical people. And my question is about the difficulties that we are facing in Iran. It is very similar to the question before that was brought up before. However, it is from a different angle. About 4 or 5 decades ago, people in Iran, they didn't send their children to technical schools because what I suppose Dr. Loukas said, that blue-collar workers are not very good. I mean, to have a not very clean job is not good. To make a dirty hand is not good. They all wanted their children to have a title, for example, engineer, doctor, physician, or something like this. However, the circumstances had changed over the past decade or so. Now that people know that being a being a technician is okay, as far as, let's be honest, as far as you earn enough money. The ultimate goal would be earning enough money to make a living, to make a decent living. Now, this was the background. Now, the main part of the question is this. The institutions that provide this kind of Tibet education to the students, they are a bit behind. The professors, the instructors, the technical professors that provide the technical education to the students are from the previous generations. There are lots of students that they use their smartphone. They are very, very active, and they know how to use many softwares that their professors don't know at all. So their professors are stuck to the older knowledge. My main question is, how can we fill in the gap between the previous knowledge and the knowledge that is current in the current world, and provide the suitable education that doesn't need what Shyamal, Dr. Majumdar said in the morning discussion, vocationalization of higher education. I exactly remember that, and it was very interesting for me. Vocationalization of higher education, what does it mean? I know what it means, but in a proper educational system, this kind of institution should not exist. How can we fill in the gap? How can we make content production in a proper way that would be suitable for the labor market? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone?
Yes.
Loukas.
Just very briefly, I agree that one of the main problems is actually teachers and trainers, because at the very end, these are the people that should implement what we are discussing in here. And I am also I believe that it's not very simple to change the mentality or the way they have to approach the new technologies and digitalization. I think we need time in this case, but also we need to have a political interest and give them incentives. That means if vocational education and training becomes, let's say, has an equal footing, then the state and all the actors, the stakeholders involved, should also promote in a way the right environment that will attract the best teachers, and they will give them the opportunity to advance in their profession. Because you have to somehow attract not only students but also teachers, and this is a whole circle. I think policies are behind at the very end.
Thank you. One last question. I will, Mr. Voss.
First the answer to the question.
Okay, briefly, yes.
As you know, in Germany, the teachers are not in vocational schools, but in the companies. So they are on the top level automatically. But anyway, the important idea might be this, might be to use this as a technological way to get the knowledge from the companies to the school. So maybe think about involving the companies, even in part, in the training, and then the technological transfer will evolve between the schools or maybe institutions and the companies. This might be an idea.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I have a question for Dr. Loukas. I mean, regarding the points you mentioned, how attractive the TVET will be by the 4 points: employability, relevance, recognition, and quality. Have you ever thought of building a model around this framework so that countries can assess how attractive their TVET system is according to that model? Because ultimately, we need to have indicators as a result of this discussion. I have a comment I want to make regarding TVET branding and how we make TVET more attractive. I think the tendency of people to think and compare between things is always there. The minute you have 2 things, you start comparing. The debate, I believe, will never stop and will continue as long as we have 2 different names. I like all the points raised. However, I would think that a point in time should come where we have something called GVET, for example. I'm just saying this, vocational general education should be seen by our future generations as one education system. Thank you.
There was a question. Just a very brief reply. We don't have a model. And actually, it's not only resources, but there is also a problem that has to do with the diversity of Europe. It's very, I can understand your way of thinking and the demand we have. But on the other hand, you should take into account that education in Europe is, let's say, governed by a soft law. So you cannot easily impose methodologies, and in many cases we have many problems exactly in trying to find the common way. So we can suggest, we can propose, we can have a research, we can give good practices, but when we are moving to the area of proposing a common methodology, it might be a problem in many cases.
Thank you very much, Loukas. At this point, I would like to close the Q&A session and hand over the mic to Mr. Oliver Haas, who will make some concluding remarks. Yes. Do you prefer a hand mic? We have 4.
I'm good.
Yeah?
Should I have 4? There's also another person who's going to make the concluding remarks.
Yes.
We'll take it with me.
Yes. Okay. Yes, 2 of you. Yes, exactly. Yes. Do you want to do it together? Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much. I have to do this. I'm not Dutch, but I'm also tall. My name is Oliver Haas. I'm head of a sector project called TVET. I don't have to explain what that means here, which is a good thing. And what we do is we do policy advice for the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. And it's been a pleasure to listen to you and to be amongst, I want to say, Shyamal's disciples. Because when Shyamal invites people, I know they're great people coming. And I think this was a very stimulating discussion. And I want to just zoom out for 2 or 3 minutes and give you a few thoughts, maybe provoking, for further discussion. So I think what I can say is that no presentation, no book these days starts without emphasizing on digitalization, the world in motion, refugees, migration. It's all happening. But the interesting thing is that after that, we usually respond with old answers to new problems. That is something that I observe everywhere. We remain in our silos. We remain in the thinking that was successful in the past, and we try to somehow cope with these challenges with answers that have worked in the past. Something very human, but I just would like to make that point at this stage, that I feel this is also happening in TVET to a certain extent. So when I was working, or started to work in TVET 15 years ago, I think I can say TVET was the ugly cousin of education. There was primary, which was good by itself. There was higher education, which was sexy, and in between was TVET. Nowadays, it has completely changed. I would say TVET has become the poster child of education in the international debate. You can see that, for example, the World Development Report next year will be on education in TVET. The IDB has just released a flagship report on skills. The G20 event in Berlin just a few weeks ago made it very clear skills are basically one of the key assets that are attributed to development. If you look at the SDGs, just really quick, it's funny when you talk to education experts that say, yeah, 4 and 8, I'm good. I don't think so. I think technical vocational education training matters to all SDGs, be it in water, education, health. Last week I spoke to the World Health Organization. In public health, it's having the right equipped skills in hospitals that's the biggest bottleneck. Sure, it's public health, but then again it becomes TVET. So I just want to raise this and bring this up really quick. So a few observations, if you allow me, and I just want to throw them out, and hopefully we can talk about this over lunch. What I observe is that we discuss these issues as we did now, but often we externally attribute problems to a world that we don't know. I'm working for GIZ. We work in countries where we have experts who fly in, who work 5 or 6 years in a country, but the problems remain local. We come with ideas that have worked, maybe in Germany, maybe the dual system. We are also asked to maybe implement the dual system, and we are somehow tempted to do so. I would say we should stop, we should really refrain from doing that and focus 100% on locally embedded solutions. Not just because it's the right way, but I also think because it stimulates the debate even further. Because right now we might even agree, we might even say, now we have the right terminology, but we don't know what this meaning actually happens in the local context. We don't know that. So let's open up. And at the same time also, I think this is something that I can say openly, is when we think of development, we think of let's plan, let's implement, let's evaluate. I think in times where things change so rapidly, we have to stop doing that. We have to experiment. We have to talk to each other while we implement. We have to have research on board while we implement. We have to have much faster circles like these where we actually irritate each other and say, wait a second, are our assumptions still relevant? And my last point is, and I think that's a bit with regards to branding and the relevance of TVET. In development cooperation, we are measured by the level of impact that we have. So every project has to put down numbers. And I always say, TVET does not create jobs. This is a complete misconception. But of course, TVET can have a significance when it comes to creating employability. Yes, we can deliver numbers, but what's even more important is to say now, how have we instilled purpose into people? This is something that we often forget. There's a quality in TVET, as we have heard from our young colleagues here, where they learn something that is implicit, where they behave and act like now I am, I don't know, a Masoner. There comes a certain self-perception with it that we often forget. But I think, and there we can maybe learn from higher education, when you talk to someone who has studied economics, he will say, I've studied that at Harvard Business School, because it matters, because they feel they belong there. Let's also create this kind of sense of belonging to TVET, because I think it is there. And I was impressed with what our young colleagues have shared with us. So impact is not just a quantity, but also a qualitative aspect. Thank you.
So I think we work as a mixed couple, and Oliver, you already mentioned international context and just being head of department in the Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training in Germany. Just maybe to add some remarks from a German point of view, and of course I think every system has really the challenge to remain attractive. And of course we can claim that it's equivalent to the vocational education, the general academic education. But I think we have really to live it and to prove it, and this is something which is a challenge every day. And I think therefore it's very necessary to have these influencing factors in mind. On the one hand, this transition into employment, the transition into employment, I think this is very important, and I think the results in Germany show that we have a very good success in reaching high employment security amongst young people. But also permeability and flexibility. So we really need to have and to keep attractive career opportunities and options. We have a young generation, we know this, a young generation that likes to keep options as long as possible. So, and we need to be aware of this attitude, and therefore we need to design occupations in a wider way and to keep it open to post-secondary and tertiary education. The technicians and also the master craftsmen were already mentioned. But we always have to combine it with further training opportunities, advanced training programs, understanding it as lifelong learning. Remuneration, money is an issue, also an influencing factor. So average training apprenticeship allowance is something which is very attractive to young people in Germany. And that guidance, really having that guidance already in place in compulsory education. Support by families, by peers, by teachers is very, very influential, very necessary, and career orientation already should start at secondary school and in particular also in grammar school. So this is on the side of the young people who by vocational education and training. But I think, and this is maybe an additional remark, it always needs to remain also attractive to companies. So this is a point we didn't really discuss this that much today, but I think it's necessary. Of course, they need to have skills staff, so they are also motivated by their own. But I think it's also very important that to underline that they, after an apprenticeship, maybe they don't need any additional vocational adjustment anymore. So these costs, they don't no longer need to take it. And of course, the apprentices are productive and become more and more productive in up to the year 3 of their apprenticeship. So, but of course it's a challenge, and in order to keep it attractive, we also have to think of small and medium enterprises, the SMEs. I think this is something where we also face the challenge in Germany. We need to pool the resources. We need to establish collaborative training possibilities, and other SMEs, I think they need the backup from the chambers and the district craft trades associations. So maybe this is from the German point of view, and I'd just like to end with the idea that I really like the format of today's meeting, today's workshop, because researchers meeting practitioners meets what we learn about vocational education and training is all about fighting prejudices, fighting stereotypes, fighting misconceptions. And I think with this format we really can give the evidence on this, by the side of the researchers, and this can meet the assumptions, and this can meet the experience, and then helps to really maybe to also to make up new images of vocational education, and therefore the practitioners are very important because they bring in their experiences. So I think it's a very nice and a very fruitful format, and I'm really happy to participate today, and that's the closing point from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oliver Haas and Birgit Thomann. Yeah, that's the point. I would like to thank all panelists for participating today, for flying in from different countries all over the world, and of course all the discussants as well. And what I really learned today is that when it comes to such a complex topic as Tibet, you have to get all stakeholders in one boat, you have to work together, and you have to use the German proverb, don't put new wine into old barrels. I hope it translates internationally. Thank you so much. And social stigmata is, for me, one of the core difficulties. And coming from a country that was divided for so many years, the Berlin Wall came down almost 30 years ago. And there are so many people still today considering themselves as Western, Eastern Germans. I can tell you it will take generations to change that. And for South Korea, I hope not 700 years. Yes. So thank you very much for participating today.
Once again, thank you so much for the brilliant insights shared by both sides of the panel. It was really an enriching discussion. At this point in time, before we formally wrap up the proceedings, I would also like to show a trailer for the upcoming WorldSkills competition that is going to be organized in Abu Dhabi later in October this year. We're also very privileged to have His Excellency Mr. Mubarak Al-Shamsi, who is the Director General of Activate, the host organization for this year's WorldSkills competition. Can I please request the panel to play the video?
I know it's just a few minutes before lunch, so I'll try to be brief. Thank you, UNEVOC. Thank you, Shyamal, for the invitation. It's a great honor, actually, to be standing in front of this well-respected audience today and to speak about WorldSkills 2017. I will not go into details because my friend Joachim, the Vice President of WorldSkills International, has already spoken about WorldSkills, and I think most people here have enough information about WorldSkills International. In 2015 in Sao Paulo, I addressed the audience and I stated clearly to the audience that 2017 would be an unforgettable event in Abu Dhabi. Now we, as you can see on the screen, only 87 days left to go and 8 hours. So put up some screens all over the center in Abu Dhabi, just to remind the staff and people there of how many days are left. We started this about 4 years back. Just imagine in 2013, when the decision was made for Abu Dhabi to host the competition, and now we only have less than 3 months to go. But let me assure you here again that it will not be just a normal event. It will be an unforgettable event. For the first time, we're going to host the Youth Forum, where we had extended the invitation to students from 70 countries to come and participate in 2 days event to discuss different topics that are an interest to the youth themselves. And vocational education, or TVET, would be among one of these topics. Also, we will have an international conference where UNEVOC would be also present. Thank you, Shyamal, for the participation. And also, we extended an invitation or invitations to about 60 different ministers from 70 countries. We also expect a head of states to be there. We're going to have other events as well during the WorldSkills competition in Abu Dhabi. But the WorldSkills Abu Dhabi will be the largest WorldSkills competition ever, with 77 member countries participating one way or another, 1,300 competitors, more than 10,000 expert jury presidents and professionals. We are also expecting 80,000 visitors just from within the United Arab Emirates, including high schools, universities, etc. The event will start on 14th for the opening ceremony and will end on the 19th. It will be 4 days of hard work for the competitors, but also what will be an enjoyable 4 days event. The space that will accommodate and host this event will be the exhibition center in the capital of the United Arab Emirates, and it will cover around 110,000 square meters. So you could imagine how big the space, covered space, will be to host this competition. I would like to invite all of you to come to Abu Dhabi during this great event. It will be an excellent opportunity to see the young world champions competing next to each other, sharing different culture, different background, and also discussing their interest when it comes to education. So if you need any assistance with your reservation, because I expect to see all of you, please don't hesitate to drop us an email or send us any request that you require. We'll make sure to make this experience an unforgettable and pleasant experience. Before I close the remarks, if you have any question, I could take perhaps a few questions if you don't mind. So, are there any questions? Any comments? No? So it means that everybody's coming to Abu Dhabi. See you in October.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope at least 49 out of the 50 people here end up in Abu Dhabi in October. But before we get to that point, I would also just make some final announcements. As you all have been making a rather valiant wait for the lunch, we'll proceed to the lunch area. It's on the 29th floor. Please follow the instructions as we go out. After that, we'll also be reconvening at about 2 p.m. So the time is rather short. But if you can also hurry up with the lunch, but we'll try our best to make sure that the discussions in the second half are just as enriching. Also, we would,
on the 25th floor.
yes, and the second session, as you can see in the agenda, is on the 25th floor, not on this floor. Finally, I'd also like to request all the panelists and all the discussants to please convene here for the picture with some of our delegates. Thank you so much once again, everyone. It's been brilliant so far, and we hope it continues. Thank you.
Birgit? Yeah, excellent.